OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
And a very good morning to you. Welcome along this Monday morning, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Yes, we are pretty happy about how the weekend went. We'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, or of course you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. You can get us on Twitter at Off The Ball, or you can DM us on Instagram. However you want to get in touch this morning to luxuriate over Ireland's crushing victory over England, we've got time for you between now and 10 o'clock. Plenty of time. We're also going to talk football. We'll deal with the Manchester United situation, the Ireland injury crisis, and everything else that's going on after a fairly topsy-turvy and interesting weekend of football. But we've only one place to start, Eoin Sheahan, and that is the annihilation, the assassination of the English rugby team at Lansdowne Road on Saturday. What a glorious, glorious afternoon.
Yeah, you must be pretty happy. I think my assessment of the Scotland game last week was described as morbid by people who were watching the show, and they were probably proven right in the end. There was just this sense of caution that came over me when Ireland beat Scotland the previous weekend, where if you beat Scotland by 3 points and have got an England team coming to town the following weekend who have hammered Ireland routinely over the previous 2 years, there was a natural sense of caution. And it is incredible, really, that was completely misplaced and Ireland won comfortably. It was just completely different to the prospect that England had posed over the last few years, and an unbelievable win, really like shades of the 2017 Six Nations when Ireland ruined the English Grand Slam on the final day. They didn't win the championship, but that win against England felt significant, and of course the following year they went on to do a Grand Slam themselves. It feels that now that you can't really argue against the fact that Andy Farrell has got this team in the right direction, and that's all anybody wanted from this Six Nations.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I don't want to do a Grand Slam next year. I think it's a bad idea for Irish rugby to do a Grand Slam a year out from World Cup. I think that, everybody, I'd bite your hand up for that. No, let's not do that. Let's have some crushing heartbreak that sets us back to go back and reconsider everything that we've done in the last minute of, and let's see how that builds us up for the World Cup the following year. I don't want to overreact to this victory either. Like, if you think about the first 15 minutes, England played quite well. We ran the ball out of touch twice on either side. We were looking a little bit kind of pedestrian, and then Robbie Henshaw and Tadhg Beirne start to get into the game. So rugby is such a weird sport that you can be playing quite well and lose matches. You can be refereed badly in key moments of games and the result goes against you, and all of a sudden your whole coaching ticket is terrible. Everything about the setup is wrong. We need to throw out the whole system. And we're all guilty of that, absolutely. But at the same time, on balance, I thought that Ireland had played okay, particularly with 14 men against Wales in the game against France. France are bloody good. And we were missing some key players in that match. And I still always felt like this is the very start of the Farrell era. He's a completely inexperienced head coach. He's had 18 months being in charge where he's not been able to wander around and spend 2 hours having conversations with people because of COVID, where they've been in the bubble and everything has been completely weird. It was always going to take a little bit of time. And he'd been naturally conservative, I think, in leaning on players who had worked in the previous regime. And over a period of time, we've seen more and more players come into the side who weren't starters. And it just felt like he was building. And also, I think the humility to go outside the setup and go, we need something else in the form of Paul O'Connell, which so clearly worked immediately. Yeah. That was, to me, the hallmark of a coach who was self-confident enough in what he was trying to do and brave enough to be trying new things that he deserved some time. I don't think this is the finished article. I think that the best part about what happened on Saturday was that they still have loads of things that they can work on, and there's still, an excitement about what would happen if Caelan Doris is in that team. There's loads of other things. What will happen when Joey Carbery's in that team? Is Joey Carbery at 12 and Robbie Henshaw at 13, with the final 18 months of 2 years of Johnny Sexton now going to be like, wow, look at this, look what we can do? I don't know, but it's exciting.
Yeah, I think the one thing that the weekend does is it changes the Wales situation from the opening weekend from an excuse into an actual legitimate thing that happened, the 14-man thing, because I certainly was thinking that the narrative around that being like, oh, Ireland were down to 14 men and lost to Wales and they came up narrowly against a good French team. I definitely had fractured those down to just complete excuses, to be honest. Whereas if you win your last 3 games, which Ireland did, all of a sudden you're like, hold on a minute. That red card actually did have a significant outcome on where Ireland finished in the Six Nations table in the end. the one thing that's really encouraging from an Irish perspective, I think, is the fact that you've got players like Sexton and Henshaw and Furlong and a few others who were there building towards that Grand Slam in 2018 and then experienced it all falling to pieces the following year and have now maybe experienced putting it back together. And I really think the tone after the game, when you listen to anybody speak, was a tone of relaxation, a tone of satisfaction, but not one of we're world beaters. I think that what has happened over the last few years won't be forgotten. And if there is success in the immediate future of this team, I'm talking about next year, which is a non-World Cup year, by the way, I think that will also be met with a calm state of mind. And I think that the learned experience of a harrowing 2 years is important as well.
I hope so, but the repetitive strain that we have within the history of Irish rugby in the World Cup cycles is mid-cycle boom, pre-cycle, pre-end of cycle, actual point of moment bust. And like you say, that hopefully these players will remember that, but it seems like there's been a collective amnesia every three and a half years. Like, yeah, we're gonna do really well in this World Cup. It's going to be great, and then it doesn't happen. The bust happens. But look, let's luxuriate in some stuff. I mean, it's hard to pick a player of the tournament when Browne was basically man of the match in every game, and then Robbie Henshaw, you're like, actually, he could have been man of the match in all of the games from an Irish perspective in the games that we played. He played so well. But then Johnny Sexton's rebirth. Like, Sexton's accuracy in kicking, he missed one kick across the entire tournament. When you think about the fact that he had to go off, if he'd still been on the field in the game against Wales, what would have happened? Like, anyway, we're thinking positively. I thought that Sexton's game was sensational as well. I mean, obviously, people are saying he's not as good as he was when he was World Player of the Year, but like, there's a value to the experience that he brings that trumps some of the absence of athleticism. I mean, I don't even notice that there's a significant diminution in the athleticism that we see from Sexton in that game at the weekend. Like, that's as well as I've seen him play.
I think you noticed it from the first couple of minutes of the Scotland game as well, where you were like, God, this guy's putting his body on the line here. Defensively, he was brilliant, and I guess with the ball in hand as well, taking the ball to the line, to a fairly ferocious English line then at the weekend, was also noticeable. He finished this tournament so well, and there's no one else you want standing over an important kick for Ireland at this point. If he can keep his body in a good place and he plays that well every single week from here until whenever it is that his career ends, there's going to be no more talk about dropping him. It'll just be a patient waiting for whenever Sexton decides the time is up, because he has really taken back the narrative after the last 2 weeks. It would be ridiculous to suggest that if there was a World Cup tomorrow that he wouldn't be the starting 10 by distance. He was brilliant the last 2 weeks. If you go throughout the entire tournament, of course, the two you mentioned there, Browne and Henshaw, absolutely brilliant, and Hugo Keenan as well as the other person I throw into that trio. And then, like Sexton, Keith Earls is a man who finished the tournament in really good form, just stepping forward and not written off. Like, Keith Earls wasn't written off. It was just, I guess, Ireland were keeping their options open when it came to their wing places at the start of the tournament. We were getting excited about Larmour and Lowe. Stockdale could be coming back to injury. But in actual fact, Keith Earls is winger number one. He is the most trusted. He is still an unbelievably exciting player to watch. He has that pace that is right up there with any other Irish winger at the moment. And if you wanted to pick players in the Ireland team that you could be delighted for when they do something good, he's probably right up there as well. And that try off a set piece, which comes from the Paul O'Connell implementation, I'm sure, with Jack Conan peeling off the back, was a brilliant moment. And like, that goes down as, for me, the moment of the tournament from an Irish perspective. That set piece, the Conan, the haunting nature of actually being able to see that in that Easterby interview then early in the week, all just kind of fitted into this moment that kind of will go down as something that won't be forgotten too quickly.
We're rounding out into a position where we've got nice depth as well. If you had a second row of Byrne and Baird, you'd be like, well, that's a pretty good second row, because at that point your back row is going to be something that looks pretty good as well. If you've got to put Byrne in your back row, you're like, well, I've got Byrne in my back row, life is pretty good. And we played the whole tournament without Caelan Doris, who we think is potentially one of the most transcendent talents that Irish rugby has produced in a long period of time. So you've got to feel very positive about it. Again, I think the other thing is that we should also, there should be a minor mourning for the missed opportunity that there was a championship there for this group. and there was a proper full trophy for the tournament there for them if things had gone slightly differently. There was a Grand Slam there. They were within a score in the other two games that they lost. And maybe it would have been too much too soon for this group, and maybe that everybody would have got too carried away. We should talk about the Welsh. Like, you know, obviously I got hammered. We got hammered. You managed to somehow scuttle away from what we were saying pre-tournament about how Ireland should go over there and do them, because we would always regret the fact that we didn't, that we suddenly would allow them to be reborn. And look what happened. I thought Wales were phenomenal over the course of the tournament as they grew into it. I thought they were amazing at the weekend. And I was also delighted that France beat them, because I don't think they would have deserved to win the Grand Slam over the course of the tournament. But Jesus, what a finish.
Yeah, the Super Saturday in the Six Nations is just now unmissable television at this point. And like I still just can't get over the fact that Wales blew a Grand Slam with the clock in the red. I just don't think this could be said enough. Like, it just had to be hammered home for me on television about 15 minutes after the full-time whistle. And I think it was just eventually said on Virgin TV, where it was like, lads, Wales lost a Grand Slam in the 82nd, was it 83rd minute? Like, it is just one of those extraordinary moments that like Welsh people must be waking up feeling absolutely horrible about. And they did everything under the sun possible to try and stop this French onslaught. This French team is bloody good, though, and that is the problem. That is the issue that the Welsh encountered on Saturday night. More than anything, they did everything they could possibly do, and France just, it turns out, are exceptionally good at attacking rugby. And once you're down to 13 men against even 14 French men, you're going to be in a whole pile of trouble. And just what an absolute cracker of a game. Like, you probably would have said, come the end of it, Wales did deserve the Grand Slam. Which is the irony here, that at the start we would have said not a hope, and the more games they won, the more reluctant we were to actually give them that credit. And then come Saturday night, they were so good against France that you're like, well, this sort of performance really caps off a Grand Slam. If you can be this dominant against France, then you deserve to win everything in the Six Nations. And then the last 20 minutes of the game were just mental, a game of their own. And I don't know how these crazy things happen in these vacuous stadiums with no fans watching on, because sometimes that energy can be the momentum shifter. It's unexplainable.
Yeah, we'll get into it in just a moment with Alan Quinlan. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 a.m. this morning on OTB AM. Alan Quinlan, as I said, standing by. We're bringing the sports pages at 10 past 8. David Meyler is going to join us at 20 past 8. We'll hear from Brian Kerr, who was on commentary duty for us at the weekend at 8:50. After that, talking Irish football, got the performance rankings at 10 past 9, a Six Nations special, and our paper review from yesterday at 9:30 is coming your way. It is 7:43 this morning. We're going to get Alan Quinlan's thoughts in just a moment. We haven't talked about England and their chronic failure just yet, Eoin, and how it's always difficult for us to watch a neighbour in distress like that.
Yeah, obviously before the 2019 Six Nations, I may or may not have said, get ready to get superior. Before that England game, which they obviously smashed Ireland in. What I meant to say is get ready to be superior around midway through the 2021 Six Nations. People just obviously picked me up wrong at the time. So I guess it was no surprise to us to see England get beaten. Like, the thing with England is that you talk about the boom-bust cycle that exists in Irish rugby. The opposite thing happens with English rugby. Like, I would not be surprised whatsoever that come the next World Cup, we're like, remember we beat England there and we were all celebrating in 2021? Well, come 2023, they got their house in order, and whether or not that's going to be with Eddie Jones is an entirely different question. That's probably where the real conversation in the Six Nations now lies, is who's going to be England coach this time next year. I
think it's going to be Eddie Jones. I think they're not going to sack him. The papers this morning are full of details on a clause that the RFU have a review, and so therefore they can sack him midway through this campaign if they want to, midway through this World Cup campaign. They don't have to stick with him, which is obviously good negotiating from whoever put the clause in, and maybe, all Irish sports bodies could come up with those in the future. But I think that actually the right thing to do is to stick with him. I don't know. Like, they did really well in the last World Cup, and you can see that team turning things around. If the Saracens players were all playing in the Premiership and were match fit, like, they definitely got better as the tournament went on. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think we were speaking to Hugo Mani on the show last week, and he did not agree that Ireland against England at the weekend was going to be like D-Day for either of these coaches, that Eddie Jones might be under a little bit of pressure, but it was never going to be decisive for whether or not he stays. I do think that that's a different conversation once you actually see in the cold light of day that Ireland were actually dominant against England. And it still does, and I know we're going to be speaking to Quinlan in just a moment, it still does beg our belief that Ireland managed to turn around what were hammerings against England into a dominant win. It just seems impossible that this group of Ireland players would get into a position where they could beat England again recently, and they did so comfortably.
We have a Gillette starter pack up for grabs on the performance rankings this morning. If you want to get involved in that, then tell us who you think should be in it. We need a red, amber and green from you. You can text us on 0879 180 180, or of course you can leave a comment for us. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. How are you?
How do you like them apples?
Oh, yeah, it was fantastic. I suppose we're all surprised by the dominance. I certainly believed it was a good performance in Ireland, that they would, play with fire and spirit and a real determination. But it's the accuracy, I suppose, and the way they execute it and the tactics they use throughout the game, I think, which were most impressive.
Listening to Andy Dunne speaking about it afterwards, and that podcast is up on the OTB podcast network, he was saying that the number of rooks that we had was far fewer than we've had traditionally at the end of the Joe Schmidt era, and that's a clear evolution in what the team are trying to do from an attacking perspective. That's what we wanted to see, really, was like, what does the Andy Farrell, Mike Catt, Paul O'Connell, Simon Easterby and this crew, what does their team look like? And obviously that's a brilliant performance, but there's a science behind it and there's an architecture behind it that suggests they're trying to do something slightly different.
Yeah, I suppose we've probably looking back overall at the tournaments, their success rate at the breakdown has been the most impressive. I think we've seen glimpses of the efficiency that they had under Joe Schmidt. It went awry for a while, and the way if you continuously hold on to the ball, and again they had more possession on Saturday against England, and they've had that in the 5 games, more possession in the opposition. And if you're at least holding on to the ball, you're going to get a chance to try and do things with it. And we've seen glimpses throughout the tournament that they're trying to put more attack and more variety in their attack, but it was probably the execution that let them down in those first 2 games. And that was probably lines of running and just timing of passes and stuff like that. A lot of teams are fanning out across the field, so you've got to find a way to get through the little space and in tight channels and stuff like that. And when you get into multi-phase, we didn't see that in Murrayfield last week, Ireland getting into enough multi-phase and building a high number of phases. So that's probably what frustrated and asked a lot of those question marks last week about the attack and closing out the game. But one thing I picked up on throughout the whole tournament, and I suppose you can put a positive spin in it when you're in the group. I've been there myself. You're trying to block out the negativity from the outside, but you're trying to get messages out that we do believe in ourselves and we do think we're on the right track. And they've continually said that. And they probably proved it, because you couldn't have produced a performance like that if their confidence was very, very low. Of course, there's pressure, and there's always pressure from match to match at that level. But I think they obviously believed in themselves, and because you can't produce a performance like that on Saturday if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't have that confidence. Because you see evidence in training, Ger, of things actually coming really good, and when you look back at videos, you think if you can find the little situations where somebody should have given a pass or kept the ball alive, and you can highlight that. And I think Ireland have got better throughout the tournament. And I've always said this about the Six Nations. Sometimes it just hits you with a bang in that first game and you've got to be up and running. And it's hard to do that because of cohesion and lack of time together and all that stuff. So they've certainly improved. But another telling stat that, stats sometimes can hide things, because when I say territory possession, in the first 2 games against Wales and France, if you look at the territory and possession Ireland have, lots of other stats throughout those games. You think, how did they lose those matches? But it's just execution, and it's finding, in those tight games, finding an opportunity to get a 7-pointer, to score tries. And they did that brilliantly at the start on Saturday. It's a hammer blow to the opposition with Keith Earl's try, and then the try before half-time, incredible. 24 or 5 phases, and the execution and the clean outs at the breakdown and the patience was just phenomenal.
So many great performances. Let's tease through them, because Tadhg Beirne, definitely potentially Irish player of the tournament. It's him, or I mean, I think you got to have Sexton in the conversation, and Robbie Henshaw as well. They were all sensational. But where does Tadhg Beirne play for Ireland? Is it like wherever he wants, wherever you need him? Is that it now? It's like first name on the team sheet wherever there's a gap.
Yeah, it depends. Like if James Ryan is back in the second row, I thought Ian Henderson had a really good tournament for a guy who was undercooked coming into it. So Beirne has gone to a level now where you have to select him. I think for Jack Conan's try, I think he carried the ball 4 times and throughout the phases there. A phenomenal score just before half time. The way Ireland kept the ball, and he was big in that. Stander was big, Furlong, lots of big plays. Keane Healy made a couple of big carries there. Sexton carried the ball 3 or 4 times himself and was the crossfield kick, interlinking in his passing. Stockdale twice, Keenan twice. Aki carried it, was a link player at one stage. He was scrum half. Jack Conan carried it 3 times. It's so many big involvements there, and Beirne was one that, just continuously throughout the whole tournament and throughout this whole game, he's without the ball, he's devastating. So to answer the question, if James Ryan is fit, James Ryan and Henderson start the second row, because their form was very good throughout this tournament as well. And Beirne has to play in the back row then. There was a concern and worry going into the game that, is he powerful enough for the second row? Is he a big second row? He's not a huge second row. He's still a very big man, and he's proved that he can do the job there now. So he was fantastic, as Robbie Henshaw was throughout the tournament. I think if you were to pick the 2 best players for Ireland throughout the tournament, it was them, followed up by Keith Earls with his performance last week. This week, Johnny Sexton, I think, has been absolutely brilliant, and to see him finishing games as well, it's great to see. So a lot of the older players, Tadhg Furlong, brilliant as well. And the stat I forgot was, 54 lineouts in the tournament, and they lost 6. It's unbelievable, to lose 6. Scotland lost 6 lineouts alone last week against Ireland. To win 54 to have 54 lineouts and only lose 6 is brilliant. So, having that possession and ability to keep the ball. There's still facets of the game that need to get a lot better. I think even the attack and the execution and the timing of passes, all that kind of stuff needs to be better. And there's a little bit of they got the emotion right, and why wouldn't you? You know what I mean? Your back is to the wall, really. You lose the game Saturday, and they're in a really bad place, and people will heap more pressure on them. So it's easy to get up for that game, but I think the calmness and the control was really impressive as well, the way they were able to deliver. And, when Bundee Aki got sent off, I felt nervous. I felt England will have a surge. They scored pretty much straight away after the sending off. But then Ireland just took control again, and they just went to a different level. So it was a phenomenal performance. They've got to try and build on that now and keep that standard for as long as possible.
It seems that you're pretty confident on where Tadhg Beirne should play over the course of the next little while. But on Robbie Henshaw, is it a little less clear at this point? Because I guess there was some suggestion last week that maybe Chris Farrell goes in because he's more of a 13 and you can just keep Henshaw at 12. Henshaw moves to 13 and plays out of his skin. Does that blow the whole conversation wide open now?
Yeah, it does. But look, there's been a fair bit of chopping and changing in the centre partnerships in the last couple of years on. And look, you can't mask over the fact that we've looked at a lot of games that Ireland have struggled in, and our centre partnership haven't been, they're brilliant individual players, but there just hasn't been that real kind of natural flow to what they're doing. And, you go back to Bundee Aki now and Robbie Henshaw, and, well, I suppose you're only as good as your last game, and that game, both of them were brilliant. I think that, obviously, for Bundee Aki getting sent off was incredibly disappointing personally for him, because I thought it was a harsh one, even though, look, letter of the law, There's contact there, but I thought he was brilliant as well, Aki, and he kind of laid down a marker of with his performance. Chris Farrell last week, I was thinking play Chris Farrell and try and get him into the team because he's a very good passer. So they've got to keep working on it and try and, understand. One bad performance again, if we had another match next week, it opens up a can of worms again, but hopefully they'll have a summer tour now. But I don't know. Henshaw was brilliant at 12 and then he moves to 13 and he's brilliant. So that would suggest that he has to start whether it's 12 or 13, and hopefully Gary Ringrose will find his form. Gary Ringrose is too good a player to leave out of the Irish team. His form has been dipped. So they're all very, very good players, but I think it's down to Mike Catt and the way they play and finding the best players to do that job, because I think they can all do a job. And going back to the World Cup when Chris Farrell came on against Scotland, he was brilliant. So he's a very good player as well. There's 4 of them there, and they're all top-class players. You could end up playing Henshaw and Aki together and having Gary Ringrose on the wing or as a full-back or something like that. Who knows, depending on injuries and who's available. But you have to try and find a position and get Gary Ringrose out of the field, because when the game opens up, he's devastating and can be devastating.
And can be brilliant in defence as well, and is brilliant in defence. And that's one of the other things that popped up at the weekend, Alan, was the individual brilliance when England had the ball from Henshaw again. Was that down to him just being in unbelievable form, or was it down to a defensive form itself, or a defensive system itself? What was the newest development you saw on Saturday?
Well, like I say, you try and fix these things as when you're in the group and you look back in the videos, and I think Simon Eastry deserves a huge amount of credit for that. The way they defended against England, the way they, won a lot of those collisions, they stopped England getting over the gain line. Billy Vunipola tried to carry a lot and he just got stopped at source. You're always going to get a team that get a yard or two here and there, but the vast majority of the time, Ireland stayed very well connected in defence. They weren't as passive as they were against Scotland last week, particularly in the last 15 minutes last weekend in Murrayfield. So they would have looked at that. Plus, we hadn't individual errors. We hadn't guys shooting out of the line. There wasn't a disconnect. They looked like they were solid together. They knew what the inside defender was doing. Obviously, with no crowd there, and I'm there doing the commentary, you can hear the communication and nominating players in defence, and that was impressive. So Simon Easterby got it right as well with his defence on Saturday, and he deserves credit for that. But good players can see this stuff and know the mistakes. You step in or you step out of the line in a match. You know yourself as a player. Players inside or outside, you'll let you know as well when you mess up. So they've sorted that out themselves. And so it wasn't any huge change that we'd seen. Or probably the change we saw on Saturday was better connection in defence and getting off the line quicker. But again, it's something, if they didn't do that against England, particularly when they're under pressure in that first 15 minutes, England would have really punished them and hurt them. So they stopped England, and then they made good reads with Robbie Henshaw, that little wraparound play where he smothers up George Ford. They're telling moments in a match, and you could see the reaction from the Irish players. Even a couple of times they held them up in mauls in the tackle and got turnovers from a maul. It all went pretty well for them.
What next? What's the bit of evolution that comes next to make sure that this isn't one of those little isolated islands of victories that we have? Because Irish rugby is full of these, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier on. Where next year is our traditional year where we do really well. Maybe we win a Grand Slam the year before World Cup and think that all the world is amazing. But what's the next stage where we wanted progress in terms of the game plan, we wanted strength and depth, we wanted some evolution, and we've got. You're definitely leaning towards a positive report card for the management structure and for the leadership group and for some of the young players coming through. So what's next for this team?
What's next is to try and get more players into the squad and caps. I think 9 and 10 are still the depth chart there. A lot of uncertainty there. Sexton goes off early in that game on Saturday. it's a different story. Maybe Billy Burns, could he cope with that pressure? Maybe he could when he comes on. But the reality is there's a difference there. You know, Gibson Park has shown glimpses throughout the tournament, and he's very, very good sniping with the ball, taking a step off the breakdown. Conor Murray did what you want him to do on Saturday perfectly. Just got the ball away into Sexton's hands quickly, kicked really well. But, you know, if those players are out and both were missing against France, it's a different story, unfortunately. Their leadership as well. So for Andy Farrell, it's developing more leaders. That game is a huge game. You can get so much confidence and self-belief and look back on that, but they've got to use it now in the right way. You've got to get Carberry back in the squad. Can Craig Casey step up to the next level and get consistency there and be a real kind of challenger for that number 9 for Ireland? Getting Harry Byrne into the squad. Robert Balakoon from Ulster. I think he's someone who just has incredible X-factor and finishing ability. And there's a lot of other young players. You know, Ryan Baird, can he challenge for that second row spot? Get more depth there. Another area probably is, you know, for Ronan Kelleher's development. I think Rob Herring has been brilliant, but he's not he hasn't effectively, made ball carries. But I watched back in the game a couple of times, and in fairness to Rob Herring, didn't make a lot of carries, but he's work around the field and the fitness and the clearing out on rucks and the supporting players being first or second player in there to clear out a ruck was phenomenal. His work rate is through the roof, and the lineouts darts were really good. You know, probably the loose head spot is another area that, unfortunately for Dave Kilcoyne, he went off so early. We didn't get to see the best of himself there and on Saturday. But Cian Healy was really good when he came on. So look, every team can go through positions. Probably the areas that we really need to address are 9 and 10. So it's, in an ideal world, in the next phase or year and a half before the World Cup, is having, a lot of young exuberance coming through into the squad and talent. And there's a fair bit of talent out there, but it doesn't make everything perfect now that we beat England, because Scotland beat England as well. Wales beat England. So England have been shockingly bad, and they really surprised me on Saturday, because I think last week and their finish in that second half against France was very impressive. So still plenty to work on for sure, and if I was Andy Farrell, I'd be trying to see who's the next line or list of players that we can bring in and have a look at.
Is Eddie Jones still the right man to coach England?
Well, they say he is, but I think tactically England are very, very blunt. They kick the leather off the ball. They try to overpower teams. And, the game evolves every couple of years, Jaron. Teams probably are figuring out what Ireland experienced 2 years ago against England in the first game of the Six Nations 2019, where England just smothered Ireland into submission, overpowered them and kicked a lot. And they try and play in the opposition half and force mistakes. They've got to add a little bit more. You've probably one of the best wingers in the world in Johnny May, and he's probably not getting the ball enough. I really thought it was telling on Saturday when at one stage in the second half, Ben Youngs just box kicked the ball up the middle of the field. I was really shocked and surprised at that. You're chasing a game and you're just kicking it away. So it shows that, when you're out in the field and the pressure there, you kind of go back to the safety net of, well, this is what we're used to. So England kicked the ball a huge amount as well. Doesn't take away from the fact that Ireland overkicked at times in those early games as well. But is he the right man for the job? I think there's way more pressure on him now, and but there seems to be a patience there and we can't get carried away with this, because England will learn a lot from this. I think they probably need to make some changes to look at the more senior players as well. They'll always have a conveyor belt of players coming through because of the depth chart they have. But he's under pressure now. But it depends what happens in the summer. what happens next November with internationals and stuff. But if they go on a run of losing matches, I think people will lose patience with him.
On Wales then, Alan, I mean, the team of the tournament really, and to lose the Grand Slam in such a manner would be absolutely gut-wrenching from their perspective. Could they have done anything more? Let's start with that perspective. Could they have done anything more with the clock in the red and France bearing down on them at the weekend?
I think it's the penalties they gave away, but it's easy to kind of just pick the penalties and say that you can avoid them. They're very, very difficult. I think they tried to be cynical. Liam Williams tried to get back on his feet, and I look back on that when he got yellow carded, and it was harsh. It was harsh. The game went crazy, didn't it, in the last kind of 10 minutes? But up to that point, for 70 minutes, Wales were brilliant. I think the reaction, the scores they got, the way they played, and they really believed they could win. But France are just sensational. I think and surprisingly, their composure and their control against everything that was going on with the Willems sending off, the ball being knocked on, them losing it in contact. You know, Wales had the ball at the end, and we gave out about. We questioned Jamison Gibson Park kicking the ball away in the 78th minute last week. Wales held on to it, and Corey Hill goes off his feet, and they get penalised for sealing off. There's always a chance that will happen. When I think of the sealing off right at the end of the game, you go back to 2013 when Ireland were ahead against New Zealand, and Nigel Owens penalised Jack McGrath for going off his feet, rightly so, and New Zealand scoring the corner. It reminded me of that. Wales had the ball. They just probably had over a minute to play it out, and they give away the penalty. And then France, the execution for that try at the end was sublime. The way Gail Ficou kind of straightened, hesitated for a sec, held the Welsh defence, gave the pass then, and Doolan scored was sensational. It was unbelievable. But you have to feel for Wales. They did so much right in that game, and were so close to winning a Grand Slam that nobody would have predicted before the start of the tournament. I thought we all thought that they would really struggle, but they started well, getting the first two wins against the odds that they probably didn't deserve, and they improved so much throughout the tournament. But it was a crazy finish, and I suppose justifiably so, France, because I think they're such a good team. They're probably the team that should be going for a Grand Slam. They're the best team in the tournament, I think.
I'm really, really devastated for poor Wales. I have so much sympathy coursing through every capillary of my blood this morning. It's a disaster. It's terrible for them. They really, they've been robbed. Fabien Galthié actually came out very, very interestingly, and Pivac and his backroom team refused to comment on this because they were like, oh, look, I haven't seen the translation for this. But essentially, and Reggie Corrigan was saying this in commentary as well, like, the Welsh are very good at annoying the opposition to the point where the opposition feel like they have to do something illegal around the breakdown. The body language was what Galthié was talking about, getting teams sent off. I've no doubt that it was a red card the other night, but it came at the end of like a 10-minute period where Wales had been offside, lying, not rolling out of the way, slowing everything down. And maybe that's why Williams ultimately gets a yellow card. It's somebody else's yellow card. They're just giving it to him. But if there'd been a penalty given, that red card wouldn't have happened, because the opportunity, the need to roll from Williams, it wouldn't have happened. I can see why teams get very upset playing against the Welsh. It's genius dark arts when it works, but it's so on the edge that it can backfire against you in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, it can. But look, I think most teams, if they were under that sort of pressure, would be close to the edge there of trying to do something, come up with a play, and it's very, very difficult in the heat of the moment. Well, Wales are very, very competitive, and they've a lot of experienced players. And what would I do if I was a Welsh player there? I'd be probably doing the exact same thing, trying to come up with a big play, and that's the chance you take. But they were probably, and again, don't give away a try, give away a penalty. I think, that even though it's probably Alan Wynne-Jones is not shouting that out, all the Welsh players know that. So that's good play if you're on the Welsh side, and it nearly worked for him. us having a conversation saying they're very cynical. I know Reggie was saying in commentary, it's probably apparent there, and it would frustrate the life out of if you're a French player or a French fan. But all teams can do that and know when to do that. But
they will get a reputation now, though, because the coaching tickets week in, week out in the advance with those meetings with the referees are going to be like, watch out for this, look at this. And I can see it becoming...
The difference is now, Ger, a lot of this stuff has been really policed heavily now. The offside lines, the in from the side, the sealing off. The Willems to clean out was very unfortunate. I think you got to give credit to Wayne Barnes and Luke Pearce for picking it up. Barnes picked it up first. I don't think there's no intention there. He tries to clear the player out. He's gone past him and puts the arm back to try and move him out of the way. Fabien Galthié is saying, I suppose, in the context of what he said, that they tried. I think that's not the case. There's no way they do that. They are cynical, and it can really frustrate you, which can lead to the opposition getting frustrated. But you've got to keep your discipline at that level. And you just felt at times that nothing was going right for France, that last-ditch tackles, holding players up, they were saving the day. And again, they had the job done. But Luke Pearce probably should have, before the Willems, I do agree with that, he should have penalised earlier, blown it up for a penalty or a yellow card to one of the Welsh players there. But overall, I think, look, as I said, I do the exact same myself. And Wales have been, of course they're going to be competitive. They're going to be on the edge. They have to be.
Yeah. They are,
to be successful.
And they've been absolutely brilliant. Their skill level under execution, the discovery of new talent, the ability to merge that old team with those young players has been absolutely sensational. Wales are reborn and are now, I would argue, one of the most dangerous teams in world rugby. The worst takeaway about this from the Six Nations from an Ireland perspective is we all feel like we're finishing on a bit of a high, but it's been a sensational France performance where all their flakiness is gone and Wales are absolutely amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why the game was so good. The way Wales approached that game the other night, they didn't try and contain France. They kept playing and believed they could attack them and take them on. And they did that brilliantly. When France had 15 players in the field, they had them under massive pressure. So they've grown in confidence, and top players. Then look at George North, the way he's played throughout the tournament. So many question marks about his form. Reece Zammit has been the find of the season for any team. I think he was, if I was picking a Lions team now, he's starting straight away. He's sensational. Jonathan Davies coming back from long-term injury. Dan Bigger, who I know well, he's a real warrior. He's kind of like Sexton Farrell with the temperament. Question marks about him. He's been brilliant for him. The competitive edge of him. Tipperick, Josh Navidi. Faletau, I thought was incredible the other night. So good for Wales the other night. Alan Wynne-Jones had a great tournament. Ken Owen. So they're all big players who found form, and when they put on that Welsh jersey, we've said it so many times over the years, they just come together, and they're top quality players. And you're picking a Lions team now, there's a good few Welsh players in it because their consistency throughout the tournament and the ability to get the job done. Incredibly unfortunate, but the impressive thing, as I said, for France was their composure. They usually capitulate when they're under that sort of pressure, and all that kind of stuff is going wrong. So it was incredibly impressive at the end, the way they were able to keep going, get those two late tries and win the game. They probably should have beaten England last week as well. They didn't have that kind of ability to see out the game from Jalibert last week and Dupont himself. But France have been the best team. They've probably been the team that have impressed me most. And I think they're going to be such a threat if Galthié can keep these guys together and on the right track for 2023 at the World Cup.
Yeah, and it's great that we're slated to meet them as well. Alan, good stuff. Thanks a million. Cheers. We'll talk to you during the week.
Cheers, lads.
That's Alan Quinlan there giving us some thoughts. Plenty more to talk about. Obviously, this week we didn't even get into the excitement around Leinster-Munster next weekend now, and just how big that match is going to be, and how there's like 2 or 3 big weekends of rugby coming over the next while. We'll obviously be bringing you the Leinster-Munster games live in the Heineken Champions Cup on Off the Ball. It is 15 minutes past 8 here this morning. If you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180. We're going to hear from Brian Kerr and Callum Robinson a little bit later on. We'll bring you the Gillette performance rankings. Up next, David Meyler joins us as always on a Monday morning to talk football.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
OTB Sports in your pocket. Listen to OTB Sports Radio 24/7.
Until that habit is broken, do you not realise how crazy those things were?
Watch your favourite OTB videos.
The benefit of being suspended, me and Scholesy were out every night, a couple of nights before the game.
Read all the latest sports news and opinions, all in one place, the OTB Sports app. Listen, watch, read. Wherever you are, we're always with you. The OTB Sports app, available to download now from your app store.
Tom Watson, you're welcome to Golf Weekly.
Hey, this is going to be fun.
Very happy to say European captain and, of course, three-time major winner Padraig Harrington joins us.
Today's special guest on Golf Weekly is Lee Westwood.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm honoured and delighted.
Let's bring in Paul McGinley, who joins us now. Paul, you're very welcome.
Shane Lowry, how are you keeping?
I'm good, thanks, yeah. Well, I'm as good as I can be.
The biggest names in golf and Ireland's best golf podcast, Golf Weekly, now exclusively available on Patreon. Go to otbsports.com/Golf Weekly to sign up now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
You want to get in touch with us, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the number. David Meyler, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning.
Not a bad weekend's football.
Well, some of the games are very good and very interesting. I suppose it depends who you support, really, for that.
Well, I support Aston Villa, and it has turned out that if you need to get right at the moment, you need a fixture against Aston Villa. We won't get into that too much because Villa hit the 40 points, and it feels like maybe they've gone on holidays. I do want to talk about Harry Kane, though, right? That was one of the ones that we wanted to talk to you about specifically. Mm-hmm. If you're advising Harry Kane, if you're in his backroom team, if you're his agent, or if you're him, what do you want from the rest of your career?
I think Harry Kane is looking at it. I want to win a trophy and I want to break Alan Shearer's all-time Premier League goal-scoring record. I think that's got to be the two main objectives on his mind. Does he feel like he's going to win a trophy at Spurs? That's the big thing. Look, there's been obviously that link every now and then about Harry Kane going to Manchester City. I think he wants to be the fight by winning things. And I think if you look at Gareth Bale joining, there will be conversations behind this, when you're sitting down having breakfast or you're having lunch or you're travelling to or from a game or whatever. Like, he'll have getting that sense of, obviously Gareth Bale winning all the Champions Leagues. He'll be hungry to win something. It's just a case of, does he feel he'll be able to do that with Spurs or not? Because I believe he's 27 now, turning 28. He's at the age where he probably has one move in him left. Probably won't go to 30, before your Man Cities would sign him or something. So he's got a lot to think about this summer. When you say a trophy, you mean the Premier League or the Champions League? Effectively, if it's Harry Kane, it's like, he's not going to be happy with 2 League Cups and an FA Cup at the end of his career. No, definitely. Look, with the calibre of player he is, he definitely wants to be challenging for the Premier League and the Champions League. Of course, under Pochettino, they were kind of, there was that year they probably could have pushed Leicester a bit closer to win it, and then obviously losing to Liverpool in the Champions League final. So he has been there, but it's just, does he feel that Spurs can get back there challenging for those big trophies? The FA Cups and League Cups for a player like him, they want more. Can they do that with, Eoin, can they do that with Jose Mourinho? I think recruitment needs to be better. I think they can. Look, it's a tough one when you talk about Mourinho, because it's hard to knock him because of the success he's had over the past with every single club he's been at. He's won trophies. So it's hard to knock him. But just something doesn't fit right at Spurs. Is there 2 or 3 players that don't fit the mould? What does he need to change? Will Levy give him the money to, recruit the players that he wants? Obviously, he signed Højbjerg in the summer, who's been a very good signing for them. But you look at it, you've got Kane and Son. When, Son is injured, Kane is kind of carrying the whole weight. Obviously, Vinicius, scored or whatever, but he's not at that level. It's a massive drop off. And if you look at when Kane obviously picked up that ankle injury or something I think it was about 2 months ago, Son more or less struggled. He's trying to carry the whole team. So they need more squad depth. And they need to stop conceding goals.
You think Tottenham are a little bit stung by what happened last time they were in the situation where they have this world-class talent who they eventually obviously accepted massive money for in Gareth Bale, and they buy 7 players, I think, with that money. Christian Eriksen and maybe Eric Lamela are the 2 players you could take from that 7 who were okay in the end. That probably hammers home to Daniel Levy just a little bit that even if you get £150 million for Harry Kane, it doesn't necessarily ensure that the next phase of Spurs is going to be a successful period.
No, definitely. You could talk about the 7 players they signed, and of course the 2 that will stand out are those 2 you mentioned, Lamela and Eriksen. You see, Harry Kane has been like Harry Kane and Gareth Bale at those times where, part of the kind of club's DNA. They know the way Spurs works, the way they play, the fans, the whole thing. When you sign players from various different countries, across the world, it does take time for them to sell in. As you said, like other players at that time were like Paulinho, and it didn't really. It's a risky game. Then if you were to go look at, I don't know, if they were to go look at English strikers, you're still going to have to fork up massive amounts of money. That's why they try and dip into the overseas market to kind of see if we can steal a player for half the price you'd pay for an English player or whatever. So it is very difficult. It is an interesting one because I feel Harry Kane is going to have that conversation. But I think he'll have it with Levy and said if the club doesn't recruit in the right way and bring in the big players to make us challenging on all fronts in every competition, then I think he will ask to leave.
And that poses a really, really tricky situation for him, even just from an image standpoint. He doesn't want to be the guy who is throwing his toys out of the pram here at a club that he professes to love so much.
Yeah, but you've got to be selfish at times. You've got to look after number one. At the end of the day, it is a business. There's no real loyalty or love in football. If you look at any of the big clubs who've had long servants, eventually they will get pushed out. Harry, look, there's no doubt that Harry Kane will be thinking about it, and I imagine the club would be well aware of it if we're not going in the same direction. How can they even? You look at it. If Harry Kane leaves, do you think Heung-min-son's going to be happy? That's the side of it then. And it can't, for someone like Harry Kane, I don't think it can be about money, that if the club were to offer him crazy money, we've always seen that with, Tottenham, their wage structure's never been, that was the biggest downfall. But the lads even that I know, they always complained about it and said that they try and obviously limit it compared to the other big clubs. But if Harry Kane was to leave or cause a fuss, you could imagine it will spread into the change room and there will be 2 or 3 other players who are looking to leave then as well.
Last question for me on Kane. If you're a Spurs fan, really what you want to happen is that England win a tournament, because that way he can at least say, my career is being successful at international level. I'm an all-time club legend with Spurs. And there's some way for that success to be fulfilled elsewhere. I think, the alternative is that they go and they win a tournament. He's like, well, I'm Harry Kane. I want to win the Champions League now as well. So maybe it's a double-edged sword, but I certainly would be cheering England on if I was a Spurs fan.
Well, no, you've said it there. It's a double-edged sword, because if he goes and wins, say, the Euros with England, then he's got to taste the silverware. And you tell me he's going to go happy, go back to Spurs and be happy or content for the next 4 or 5 seasons not to win anything. Once you get your hands on a trophy, you want more. I think that's the big thing. That will be evident. Of course, us across, the Emerald Isle there.
Not so happy.
Won't want it. yeah, not so happy. But look, it's a tough one. I know Harry Kane say Lota. I don't know him that well. He might, for all we know, he might be thinking, do you know what? I'm never leaving Tottenham. I want to be remembered as an all-time great at Tottenham. I could be completely miles off it. He might say, Tottenham is my club. I want to stay at Tottenham for the rest of my career. There's always, that comparison is always drawn to Alan Shearer going back to Newcastle. Big difference was Shearer did have a Premier League title when he went back to Newcastle. So he'd already achieved something. He then chased the dream of winning something with Newcastle, which was more important to him than, obviously signing for Manchester United, where he'd probably end up now having 5-6 Premier League titles. But he chose to go to Newcastle to try him. But he had silverware in his back pocket. That's the big thing for Kane. Does he stay or does he go? I know it's gonna be an interesting, few months to see what does unfold.
Yeah, it certainly is. Can we talk about the FA Cup and Leicester City beating Manchester United 3-1? What happened to Manchester United here, David?
I was thinking about that before I sat down this morning. It's kind of look, I get it. they've had a very busy schedule, obviously with the Europa League, both games against Mullan, that massive win against Manchester City. Of course, then, the demands of that, and I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer defended his decision to rotate the team. I feel, look, they've got Brighton coming up next before they play Granada in the Europa League. I just felt, I don't know, is it the fan in me or is it the ex-player or whatever? It's the FA Cup quarter-final. It's a chance to, and don't get me wrong, let me highlight it. The players would have known at half-time that they were playing Southampton in the next round if they won. Everyone would have known. That would have been common knowledge. Somebody would have seen the draw and word would have filtered around the change room. Like, of course, as you make the substitutions at half-time, they're talking about Bruno. Bruno hasn't played at all in the FA Cup. Obviously, yesterday, he hasn't started the game for United. I just felt that you bring in Telles, who's not played in a while. You bring in Donny van de Beek. Obviously, Pogba played came on against Milan where he changed the game, but in the sense that he's not been regularly playing. Massive game, to change a lot of players. I think, look, he's defended it. I think he got it wrong. I would have played my strongest 11. I would have gone for it.
I guess when you spend that amount of money on someone like Donny van de Beek, you should be able to trust him come the end of the season to be able to fill in for a knackered Bruno Fernandes and maybe do a decent job. What needs to change for him personally or for those working with him at the club to ensure that he can be that guy next season?
I think there's a couple of things with Donny van de Beek. I think he's very unfortunate. Look, he's not played, but then he looks like he wants to play in that kind of number 10, that creative role. Unfortunately, Bruno has probably been one of the most informed players in the world in the last 13, 14 months. That he's been very lucky there. When he has gotten an opportunity, he's only gotten slight few minutes here in games where they're very comfortable or whatever. He's just not played enough. And I think also if you studied him yesterday, you can just see by the way he's passing the ball, his confidence is shot. He gets on the half turn, and then it's like, I don't really fancy trying to punch the ball through the lines to say Greenwood or Martial. He ends up taking the safe options because he's trying to feel his way into the game. He's probably second guessing every decision he makes. It's been very difficult, but a lot of it's down to the young lad on. He's got to go away and work hard, and he's got to I imagine there'll be a conversation of look, what's required, what do I need to do, and he needs to up, whether it be his assists, his goals. He needs to add more, and that comes from within. He's got to be working harder, because it's not work for him so far. And I genuinely believe if there might be even a conversation this summer, do we move him on? And there'll be a conversation between Donny van de Beek and his representatives, will I stay or will I go? Because he's not played at all, and for the young man who had an excellent year with Ajax in the Champions League and whatever, to come now and your career stalled for a year, he won't want that to happen again next year.
Ajax put an ad in the paper telling everybody how much they loved Donny van de Beek when he left. It was a weird kind of. They obviously really truly believed in him as a man and as a young person and as an ambassador for the club, and it's just been a complete flop.
No, it has. It's just not worked out. And look, you wouldn't be surprised if come the summer, if he's loaned back to Ajax or whatever. But there's always that love and affection from Ajax, because the young boys, they sign up at 6 or 7. If you looked at De Ligt, De Jong, all those, they come right through from really young age. So there is that, family aspect with Ajax. So. Of course, look, they're going to be eyeing up the situation, thinking they might feel like they can get him back. I definitely think it probably is just for him as a young man just to cut ties and just say, look, I think it's best I go back. Go back to Ajax or something, because they'll take him back in a heartbeat. It's just not worked out. He's just been unlucky. A lot of it has been down to the sensational form of Bruno Fernandes, but I definitely think it is time for him to cut ties.
You were waxing lyrical about Tielemans here on the show last week.
Good shout.
Indeed. Good timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. No, look, I've always been a keen admirer. I did tweet out yesterday that it was the West Brom game I saw, so I want to correct myself. It was the Sheffield United game. You know what it's like when a goal goes in and you're kind of fluttered and you think of the wrong game. but he has. You know, a lot of people said he blows up after 60 minutes. I was hit with that feedback. I highly doubt it. And then there was a lot of people said, oh, he wouldn't fit at a Liverpool. But this is why you have the managers you have. If Yuri Tillemans went to Liverpool, he's playing under Brendan Rodgers' style, right? You got to think that Jurgen took over from Brendan. A lot of these players would have, you know, who were at Liverpool at the time were used to playing under Brendan's style. Jordan Henderson being the prime example as a midfielder. Jurgen has taken him on 3-4 levels. I've no doubt that if, you know, Tielemans signed for Liverpool, that he would take him on and develop him even more as a player. But I like him. I'm a big fan of him. And like, he's 23, he turns 24. I think it's in May. So he's really young. So he's got a lot of good years ahead of him. Whether or not this is true about Gini leaving, it's interesting. But then again, at the same time, how much would Liverpool have to pay for Tielemans? Because I can't see them coughing up 60, 70 million for him.
No, and that's potentially what they might want for him. On the Premier League then, West Ham United against Arsenal, clearly the game of the weekend, David. We just wanted to focus on Declan Rice here, actually. Like, I mean, his partnership with Thomas Souček has been brilliant all season long, and Rice exceptional yesterday. No, both of them. Like, what a signing Souček has been. I know you mentioned Rice or whatever, but we'll get to him. But Souček has just been incredible, as in, like, his positioning in midfield, he breaks up play. And then, of course, look, he's a threat in both boxes in the sense of defending. He's heading everything away for you, and then in attacking phases. I think he has built up a massive partnership with Declan. Like, you look at Declan for such a young man, I believe he started the last 100 of the last 101 Premier League games, which is just incredible, you know, to show his consistent, like, level of fitness to stay. And he plays a big role. Obviously, he's taken over the armband when Mark Noble's not played, but certainly in his performances. This is a shame that he picked England, because we could do with, you know, a player of his caliber at this moment. What has he brought to the next level this season? Like, I mean, West Ham, I guess people have put it down to one of those, not Leicester-like under Ranieri, but there is a sense of surprise, or maybe a patronising sense around West Ham this season, that they're not going to be able to back it up next season. But with Declan Rice, he epitomises a genuine improvement, where this isn't a one-off season from Rice. We've seen this potential coming for quite some time. So what has he specifically added to his game this season to actually get to that level where he's in and around a team, in a team that's in and around the Champions League places? Well, I interviewed Declan about 10 days ago, and Aaron Creswell, I interviewed the two of them about 10, 11 days ago, and they both highlighted, I said, well, what's different this season? What's changed? And they both highlighted the squad unity. We're more like, you know, more like a family. So that's the big thing. It kind of, you know, it seems to me that they've all pulled together. Whatever David Moyes is doing behind the scenes, all the players have seemed to bought into it, and they're all working together. He said there's no egos. They just go, they work hard every day, and they just, you know, they have a great bit of banter between themselves. I think that's the big thing for them. You know, like, if West Ham have always been capable of, like, you know, producing a performance and getting a result, but now they've been able to find it on a consistent level. And I know you mentioned Declan there. I think for him, Declan's probably not changed the way he's played in the last 2 years. He's always kind of been that dynamic midfielder trying to get up and down the pitch, you know, very good at breaking up play, very comfortable on the ball. I think what has developed over this last season has certainly been his mature, like the way he plays. He's far more mature. Like, he's playing beyond his years, in the sense that, like, he looks like someone who's been around for, you know, 6-7 seasons. He's certainly, like, maturing, and they all look to him for such a young man. He is that inspirational tool, in the middle of midfield. And that's a big thing for them. The other thing from that game I just wanted to chat to you about as well is the performance of Martin Odegaard, David. Like, I mean, he's been so good since he's come into Arsenal. I would say that Arsenal fans would be happier if he actually lost a bit of form, so that Real Madrid won't be too interested in signing him back, because this guy could clearly make a difference to Arsenal in the long term if they manage to sign his permanent signature. No, definitely. We've all heard the hype over the last, 3-4 years of this young man. Certainly yesterday was one of those games where I did look at him. I like to think of 21 years of age. He went and tried to get the ball everywhere when they were 3-0 down. He was the one that was actually trying to drag them back into the game. And he is an exciting talent. Of course, Arsenal fans
will Real Madrid even go? I highly doubt it. I think there was probably conversations that, like, I don't know what is this third, fourth loan. He'll probably end up going alone again for the next year or two. But certainly he was the driving spark in Arsenal. And to think, like, if they can get Aubameyang, Lacazette and all those firing at the same time as this lad, then Arsenal can, they are a very good outfit. But of course, if you look at the West Ham game yesterday, the goals they conceded is just so sloppy, especially, Jared Bowen's won the second one. It's just awful defending. To give away the free kick, everyone's got their back turned. But at the same time, Odegaard does look a hell of a player.
Yeah, I guess that question is, how do you change flakiness in a team? Like, I mean, you can sign quality, but that mentality, David, is just, you can almost see it haunting Arsenal at some point in this Europa League campaign as well, that performance is in them. Even against Olympiacos last Thursday, it was shaky enough despite having a 3-1 lead from an away leg. There's always just something about that mentality that isn't quite there, that is enough to get them to the next level. No, definitely. And as everyone was quick to pick up on yesterday, that more or less, that game yesterday against West Ham more or less summed up Arsenal's season. To be 3-0 down, look awful, look like you can't string 4 or 5 passes together, and then a few words are said, and you end up getting 3-3. That just kind of sums them up. I don't know, Arsenal have always, I'd say Arsenal, the biggest thing they lack is kind of character. When I mean that, I don't mean the team. I mean kind of big characters individually. Lads who are, captain material. Like the whole Aubameyang scenario of your captain being late, your captain being dropped. That shouldn't, like, stuff like that should never happen. No, that's just, no, I don't disagree with what Arteta did, but I think stuff like that should never happen. He's the captain. He's meant to set the standards. They're missing that. If you look at the old previous Arsenal captains, your Tony Adams, your Patrick Vieira, those big mainstay, spearheaded figures in the middle of a team. That, they used to, if you remember, I don't know if you've heard this, but Arsenal used to always have that thing, but whenever they were training, whatever the captain wore, the other players had to wear. So if the captain came out in long sleeves, you had to wear long sleeves. That was kind of like, that's the kind of, that sense of, leadership in big players, they don't have anymore. That's the big thing. And you talk about the flakiness. If Arsenal could address that with a big influence on the back line, even one in midfield, I think Partey could do that. With the rest, that will then help them if they can bring in a proper leader, to almost cut the nonsense out of them. I think they could obviously pick themselves up, but at the moment it's just, they're so hot and cold. It's every second game is a win and then it's a loss, and it's just going to be, looks like for them, it's going to be one of them seasons where they just plateau. Well, it's been 10 years of us talking about Arsenal like that. David, I do want to move on and talk about Ireland, because obviously we've been really badly damaged by a number of injuries, and I just wanted to kind of get your take on this, because I was looking back on the team selection for the 1-1 draw in Germany when you played right back that night, and it was a completely different team selection from the previous 3 days. We were in the midst of an injury crisis, a lot of players playing out of position with new partnerships. Like, the players who are fit aren't thinking, Jesus, everybody's injured. They're thinking, yeah, of course, this is my chance. Yep. I know, it's us lot now, the pundits on the outside, or the experts as we like to call ourselves. They're the ones going through everything. Like, of course, look, Darren obviously been injured. Queeveen then picks up the knock. Kevin Long is out. Callum O'Dowda, of course. Conor Oren. We're all looking kind of going, it's almost because we're trying to, we sit here and we talk about Ireland games coming up. Of course, we're excited. We're looking forward to them. We're trying to almost pick our 11s that when a name is ruled out, there is that sense of, oh my God, that's another one gone. A player won't be thinking like that. As you said there, and you go back to the Germany game, I played right back at that day. You'd have had Stephen Quinn played. Johnny Waters played right side midfield. I can't even remember the whole lot of the team. I'll give it to you. Forwards and goals, you were right back. Yeah. It was O'Shea and Wilson, centre back. Yeah. Ward, left back. Quinn and Whelan in the middle of midfield. Walters, McGeady, McLean and Robbie Keane started the game. Oh, it's a hell of a team. Hell of a team. Yeah, but at the same time, as you said there, like, I wasn't, like, I think Shams would have been the mainstay right back at that time. Picked up an injury, and I think Cyrus had just been drafted into the squad around that time.
And then Martin just came to me and said, you're going to play right back. And that was kind of it. And you should get on with it. That's why, like, even I was on Saturday show with JD and the boys, I said, I still feel Ireland are capable of going and getting a result. Now, I know a lot of people listening to this or watching this will say, like, how can you be optimistic? It's because I played in games with Ireland where our backs were against the wall and we got results. Like you said there, that was a makeshift team. Of course, look, still enough good players on that pitch to make something happen. We were playing an exceptional Germany team, but we knew we could get a result. We believed in ourselves. That's why I am hopeful, and I believe that, come to Serbia again, we can get a result.
The Serbia manager, Dragan Stojkovic, has come out and said Ireland can be uncomfortable to play against, but I can't accept that they can play better than us. I know Alan Browne has come back to have a nibble at that as well, but is that the sort of stuff you almost love to see in the Ireland camp, an opposition manager writing off Ireland on technical levels and stuff like that?
You see how you flip that on its head to technical levels. I genuinely, stuff like that wouldn't even bother me. I wouldn't, like, even if it was brought up at the time, wouldn't even acknowledge it. Of course, it's almost mind games that, we're technically inferior to them. We don't play as good football as them. Stuff like that wouldn't even bother me. I'd be so solely focused on my own, preparation, my training, leading into the game, on my starting the game, and I'd be concentrating on the other, like all the rest of my teammates. Like Stojkovic says, wouldn't interest me at all.
What is the mood? What are the conversations about the players who are missing and the players who are there? Like, who do you expect to pick that up this week in the changing room and around? Like, obviously a lot of the responsibility falls to the management, but the players have to stand up this week too and essentially take ownership.
Yeah, of course they do, but that's the same as any other trip, any other campaign. The players inevitably have to stand up once it comes game time. They've got to produce a performance to get a result. There's no doubting that, look, you see the videos the FAI tweet out there of the new lads coming in. I saw Robbie Brady, Seamus Coleman greeting them. All the older senior lads who've been around the world will obviously welcome all those lads in. They'll be, they'll feel at home. Of course, it's kind of still, you kind of forget, like, there is COVID, so we don't know which way and what it's going to be like. Are players rooming together? You know what I mean? Are they allowed to sit down and have snacks and, chit chat, play pool or catch up or whatever? I don't know the ins and outs of it. Or do you have to stay in your room and make the old 2 meter Peter distance? So it's an interesting one. But look, the lads have got to pick it up. I imagine they'll know the importance of the opening game of group things. So you imagine, obviously, this morning they'll be training probably an hour and a half or whatever. That Seamus will be driving it on, kind of saying, like, come on, like, this is it now. Like, we've got a couple of days to lead into the game. And Stephen will know his time is valuable because, he's got 3 games coming up. The turnaround is quick. So it will be interesting to see how they get on.
Who would you start in midfield?
Oh, well, Howren's out now. I tipped Howren. Obviously, Josh Cullen, if people keep telling me, I haven't seen a lot of him. I'm not going to lie. There's got to be a case for him. Jason Malumbi hasn't played a lot of Preston, which is obviously disappointing because I actually really like the lad. I think Jason Knight has to start because of, he's played regular football. I'd go with Jason Knight, Jeff Hendrick, and Alan Browne. I'd go for Jeff. I know Jeff hasn't played a lot for Newcastle, but I go for that experience. And I do think Jeff can play the kind of deeper role. I'm sorry, Josh Cullen, if you are listening, but I've not watched enough of Anderlecht's football, so I don't know how he's getting on.
All right. I mean, at least there is some strength and depth, given that we have lost all of the players that we've lost at this point. Stephen Kenny must be really cursing his luck. But look, we faced the week with enthusiasm and optimism. David, great to have you with us. Thanks a million.
Cheers, guys.
We'll obviously get into more detail on the Republic of Ireland over the coming days. There's a busy period, as we said, 3 games to get into. And a lot riding on it, obviously. We'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the number. West Ham 3, Arsenal 3 was one of the games of the Premier League season. It was live across Off the Ball with Stephen Doyle and Brian Kerr. Here's what they made of it all.
Brian, that was probably one of the best Premier League games we've seen all season. It finished 3-3 between West Ham and Arsenal. Who will be the most angry and who will be the most happy manager, do you think, after that game? Of course, West Ham giving up that 3-0 lead.
Well, I think Mikel Arteta would be relieved. Whenever your team is 3-0 down in half an hour, you're kind of, there's a sense that it's not going to be a good day for you, and that you might have to be asking very awkward answering very awkward questions at the press conference. But so he would have been relieved that they got back to the 3-3 without a doubt. He'd be annoyed at how poor they were in that first half of the game, and David Moyes will probably feel, he won't feel good. You know, you get 3-0 lead in a match. Football matches are hard to win, and often you get 2 goals up in your match and you feel a certain level of comfort that you can lose a goal and still win the match. But you get 3 up, you're going, this is great. But you also know there's too long to go, and that's the problem. And you know, I think we sensed ourselves once Arsenal got the first goal, and they were playing so well that there was a possibility they would pull it out. They got back to 3-0, and I imagine David Moyes is quite upset, but he'd also would be a little bit of a sense of relief. Well, at least we got a point. He's got a very poor record himself against Arsenal over the years. I think he's only had 4 wins in maybe 19 games, and West Ham wouldn't have a great record against Arsenal either. They're usually behind them in the table. They're ahead of them at the moment. So I'd say very mixed feelings for both managers tonight. But from our point of view, great game, brilliant entertainment, lots of attacking football, some brilliant individual displays, and some very mixed displays from some very good players who had disastrous spells in the match, but kind of did some brilliant things too.
David Moyes has been criticised in the last couple of months for approaching games negatively. The likes of Manchester United away, Liverpool at home, Manchester City away, games where I suppose people thought, well, look, they've nothing to lose here. They can go for these matches, and instead they play negatively and then lose the games anyway. But you could not accuse them of that today. They went out there this afternoon. The first 30 minutes, West Ham were superb.
Well, I know I'm not very aware of that type of criticism. I think there might have been a discussion around the formations they put out, particularly last week against Manchester United when he went to 3 centre-backs, played Creswell inside, but he's done that earlier in the season as well. And you know, David Moyes has always been a pragmatic manager in terms of, he knows the first job he has to do is to get results, and West Ham supporters weren't very enthusiastic about his return, and now he's getting those results. I'm sure they're all looking in from outside saying, isn't this great, I wish we were in the stadium watching us getting these results. So the fact that he chooses to maybe pick a more practical team, I'd say, to try and get a result against teams he would feel that have better squads of players, which undoubtedly the teams you mentioned, Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, would have. I think it's fair enough for him to tactically to tweak it a little bit, maybe put in, you know, instead of playing the 4-2-3-1, that he plays a 5-3-2 system, for instance. I think that's okay. Today it wasn't about tweaking the system to be more secure defensively. Today was certainly back to what's worked for them against the majority of teams in the league, but have the 4 attacking players on the pitch, with Souček joining up, Declan Rice giving a bit of cover to back 4, full back supporting when it's on. And that's how they approached it. But they were pinned back in the second half today, and they struggled to find the answer until late on. Then they broke away, had a few good attacks, and Antonio had the chance to put them ahead again, and he hit the post. But tactically, I think there wasn't much wrong with the performance. The substitution of Mark Noble, he put him in when it was 3-2. But the momentum had already gone to Arsenal at that stage, and they couldn't turn it until it got to 3-3.
Jesse Lingard got a lot of criticism at Manchester United for perhaps not putting in the kind of performances that saw him really break out on the scene early in his career. I know he's 28 now, but has it got to a stage now where he was like a small fish in a big pond at Manchester United? And perhaps sometimes players like that, when they go to a smaller club, they can find a new lease of life. And I suppose what I am asking is, maybe should he look at trying to make that move permanent to West Ham, or do you think he want to go back to Manchester United and prove himself again?
Well, I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussions around that. I would imagine the first one would be with West Ham, with David Moyes getting his contract sorted out and he stays on the manager. Then his discussion would be with Jesse Lingard to say, you know, I would like you to stay here and we're prepared to do a deal with Manchester United. And then there's a lot of dealing financially. I don't know whether West Ham would have taken on Jesse Lingard's wages in full or whether Manchester United are still paying them. Then Jesse Lingard has to have a discussion with Solskjaer, if he's still the manager, as to how much he's wanted there. Manchester United might see it as another wage off the wage bill and an opportunity to bring in another player to replace him in the squad that would give a bit more to the squad where they feel they might need strengthening. So, you know, there's a lot of things that can happen, but overall it looks like this has worked well for Jesse Lingard, and he's playing matches, enjoying his football, scoring goals, back in the English squad, and West Ham have got a good player there. So, you know, the answer might be for him to stay with West Ham, go back to Manchester United, be a fringe player, but in contention for trophies is always an attraction.
I know it was an outside chance for West Ham to get into the Champions League this season, but with that result now, they're 2 points off Chelsea. Chelsea are just, you know, storming down everybody
Chelsea
in front of them. Yeah, they're playing so well.
Chelsea and Manchester City are the two form teams in the top half of the table at the moment. Leicester are hanging in there. Manchester United look like they have enough points in the bag already that with reasonable form now they'll stay in it. So there's probably one place still available. I'd say that Leicester are the team under threat. Can West Ham catch Leicester? They could, but there's also Liverpool and Everton, I think, in the picture on that one as well. Am I leaving somebody else out?
Tottenham maybe.
No.
They're an outside.
I deliberately left them
out. So that's all up for grabs. Listen, Arsenal, as we know, they're out of the top four race, really. So as you said before the game, it's going to be the Europa League for them to try and get into the Champions League. They've got a decent enough draw against Slavia Prague, and then it could be Unai Emery in charge of Villarreal or Dinamo Zagreb in the semi-finals if they get that far. But if you look at that Arsenal team now, they're in really good form at the moment. And just look at a couple of the players in the attack, like we both said about Martin Odegaard today. He played so well. He seems to be really finding his feet there. A player who's been, you know, I suppose touted as the next big hope in European football, and for Norway, playing at Real Madrid. He just never really took off there at the Bernabeu, but he seems to have found his feet now at Arsenal, and he's playing really well. And players like himself, Saka, Emile Smith-Rowe, Lacazette was brilliant today. You'd have to give Arsenal a really good chance of winning that Europa League.
Of course you would, if they play at the level they can play. But but the basics, Stephen, are you've got to be solid defensively to win anything. You can't win anything.
So why does he keep changing the centre backs? That's the big one, isn't it?
I don't know. I don't know which who are the best of them. I mean, David Luiz can be such a... He seems to be a great fella around the club. People seem to like him. He seems to have personality. Seems to have some leadership qualities. But leadership qualities also involve consistency in your own performances. Hard to keep demanding stuff of other people if you're not doing it yourself. And he's too prone to errors and misjudgments and like they've given away goals in the Europa League. I've been covering the Europa League games as closely as I have the Premiership games, and the performances in that have been very mixed. I mean, they had the turnaround situation with Benfica where they were losing the game 2-1. They would have been out, and they needed 2 late goals from Aubameyang. He was terrible in the first match actually against Benfica, but it was a very, very mixed performance to say the best. And then Olympiacos in the away game, they did their best to cough up goals, I would say, to Olympiacos. They did cough up one bad goal, then out trying to play the ball out through the back to Ceballos. He got caught in possession, and El Arabi just tucked her into the net. David Luiz almost gave away a goal in a similar situation, trying to play it out from the back. And we've seen that. I pointed out the Burnley goal recently as well. You look at them today as well, try to play it out in the back, and it looked hesitant. Didn't look comfortable or competent, I'd say. Played the ball out to Tierney from the back, and he ends up trying to play it inside. It's intercepted by Rice, away to go, and they scored a goal, conceded a goal from that too. So, you know, they're not solid defensively. They haven't got a unit. They're not conceded as many goals as they used to in big games against the better teams. I give them that. 3 was a lot for them conceded today. In general, I think before today they were only on 29 maybe against in 27 games, which isn't too bad by Arsenal standards. So I think there has been an improvement overall there, but they're still not solid enough. Leno let in another soft goal today. Yeah. So to win the Europa League, they're going to have to win. They've got to beat. They've got to win two legs, over 2 legs, over 2 legs, and a final. That's 5 games. Yeah. The Arsenal I've seen up to now aren't reliable for 5 big matches. Slavia Prague, decent side, beat Leicester, beat Rangers, over 2 games, no complaints. Lively, energetic, organised, disciplined team that create loads of chances. Villarreal, Dynamo Zagreb, so Dynamo beat Spurs over 2 legs. You know, and I don't think they're that good, but they're good enough to beat Spurs, so they have to be respected. Villarreal, 7th in the Liga, not a great side by any means, but technically good side. So, you know, Arsenal should be capable of winning that side of it, and then you're looking at the final against the other side. But the other side of it is difficult. Roma, Ajax, Manchester United, of course, on the other side, the draw. It won't be handy.
Absolutely not. Just to ask you finally, Brian, before I let you go, because we had your old skipper Kenny Cunningham here last week with me, and he spoke in quite. He was praising Josh Cullen, the Irish defensive midfielder, of course, who is formerly of West Ham, of Anderlecht. Yeah, now, granted, we don't see a huge amount of Belgian football, but he's played 18 games now for Anderlecht. He had quite a good bit of experience under his belt going over with Charlton and Bolton and the likes on loan from West Ham. Do you think that perhaps he's a player that Stephen Kenny needs to seriously look at for starting these games against Serbia?
Well, I'm sure he's looking at him seriously, but he hasn't had enough time on the pitch for Ireland. I think he played in the last couple of games. He came off the bench. He's got 4 caps, but no starts in competitive matches. And he's looked neat and tidy on the ball, that's for sure. And he looks like he's a good range of passing. I'm sure Stephen is thinking about him seriously, given that there hasn't been anyone who's been outstanding in the middle of the field for us. So, like, the favourites to play will be probably the likes of Hendrik, Sheahan, picked up an injury yesterday, mightn't be available anyway. Robbie Brady, another one for in there. Alan Browne.
Malumbi's in the talk as well, I suppose. Discussion. Jason Malumbi will be in the discussion
Malumbi,
as well.
but Malumbi's form, he's not been playing any matches recently. And this is the problem Stephen has. So many players haven't been. Jeff Hendrick's been in and out at Newcastle. Got on a half time yesterday. But Newcastle are near the bottom of the league and he's not getting the game. But Newcastle, Robbie Brady in and out of Burnley, not a regular starter by any means. So that is concerning. So I'm sure Stephen is thinking about him, but it's a big match. You've got to get decisions right. You've got to think about it long and hard. You've got to look at the players, assess them in training in comparison to each other. You're trying to compare them in matches, but it's hard to go to the matches. I know Stephen has been getting to matches and he's got to see some of the players. Don't know whether he's got to Belgium or not to see Anderlecht. He's probably able to see them on TV. But it'll be a big decision, no matter what team he goes for. He's big decisions to make, and the goalkeeper, as I said earlier to Sheahan, our goalkeepers are not in great shape if Kelleher is not fit to play. Bazuna is he's playing at Rochdale, but they're bottom of the league, conceding an awful lot of goals. And the other two are not playing. That's Kieran O'Hara, not in the starting team at Bolton, and Travers not in the starting team at Bournemouth. So that's concerning. Centre half positions concerning. You know, who's going to play up front? James Collins got a goal when he got on the sub yesterday, but he's not playing regular at Luton. Shane Long not playing regular. Connolly, we're not quite sure where he is at the moment. Ida looks like he's injured. So his options for the front position are slim too. But the main thing is, no matter who he picks, there's nobody in the group and say, I didn't get a chance or I deserve to play, because none of them have been playing outstandingly well for the clubs. Stephen has to go on his own hunch and pick what he thinks is the best team for the match, and we just have to wait and see and hope that they perform and do their stuff against what will be a very technical team who you'd imagine will be highly motivated under the new manager to get a good start.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Brian.
OTB AM.
OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Right, we've got a massive week ahead for Irish football. Let's hear now from the Irish camp, the lads talking about it there. Let's start with Alan Browne. He was asked to respond to comments from the Serbian boss, Dragan Stojkovic, he's quite bullish in his expectations about the level of quality that his team are going to face and how they're going to beat Ireland.
I'm unfazed by that. It doesn't bother me. We expect to beat Serbia. I've no problem with that. As a manager, you expect your team to go out and win. So, fair play to him for coming out and say it, because a lot of people, hide behind words and don't say what they're thinking. But I know our manager will be expecting the same from us, and we'll see how we go on the day.
Okay, so that's Alan Browne. I think angrily retorting to Dragan Stojkovic. That's how that would be reported, right? He brushed aside concerns about Ireland's technical proficiencies and lashed back.
Yeah, well, after a vicious lash from Stojkovic, he certainly has hit back. Like it is funny that this is just a thing that comes up every single pre-match for Ireland at this point, where you have an opposition manager coming out and slagging off their ability, basically. Now, in fairness, I might have been putting words in Dragan Stojkovic's mouth by suggesting that he was talking about Ireland on a technical level. But I think we can rightly assume when people expect to be better than Ireland, that's what they're talking about. I don't think they're saying we've got a better mentality than Ireland or we've got a better hunger than Ireland. I think what Stojkovic meant to say is we think that we're better footballers than Ireland.
And let's just go back to this being a battle for the future of Irish football. That was what Stephen Kenny wanted to address. He wanted to make sure that no manager was going to be able to come along and over the next decade say, look at these pygmy potato people and their pygmy football. No, that's not what's going to be able to. At the end of this, we're going to be playing great football. That's what people are going to associate with Stephen Kenny and the Ireland football team. And, that wouldn't be the worst thing to happen if we would be able to throw out all these cliches. Let's hear from Callum Robinson. Here he is talking about Ireland's lack of goals.
I can only speak for myself, and I don't think it should. It shouldn't, because, as you said, you start panicking when you're not actually getting the chances. Like, we are getting some good chances, and I obviously have missed the last few games through the COVID reasons, which was annoying. But it's been hard for the gaffer as well. You got to remember, I think there's 14, 15 players by the last game, in the last trip, from the team that he picked. So it's tough. The team's changing all the time because of obviously all the COVID stuff, which is, we can't help that. So it's tough to I know that everyone's having to deal with it, but when you have like 14, 15 players from who is picked in the first squad to then the last game, all them changes, it's tough. So no, I don't think that no one should be down about it. I just think that, it's like one goes in, two goes in, or we get a win, even if it's off an own goal, you get a win, and then just everyone picks themselves up and we go again. So I'm not personally down. Obviously, I can't speak for everyone, but I don't think there should be any pressure at all. Should just go out there and play. And as I said before the Slovakia game in one of these, I was confident, and I thought we'd done really well that night, and lucky to lose on penalties, but we created chances, done really well, broke Slovakia down through the thirds. I don't think many supporters have seen football like that from us in a long time. So there's small steps, but as you said, the main thing is the result at the top, and that needs to change, and goals that need to come. So it's understandable why people can be annoyed, but I think we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, very calm, reasonable assessment of where we are. The big game, the most important game, was the Slovakia game. We played quite well. We created a bunch of chances. We should have won that game, and just imagine the difference in how we would be talking about this Ireland team if we'd won that game on.
And it could so easily have happened. Like, there isn't much more you can do from a management standpoint, even from a player preparation standpoint, to have affected that game in a more positive way for Ireland. That's certainly my view on it. Maybe people think that's OTT. Like, they couldn't do anything about the COVID situation. Maybe
seats on the plane is going to be something.
Let's not get back into that.
Yeah.
On a footballing sense, there's not much more they could have done. Like, Conor Howard doesn't go out to miss that opportunity. He I'm sure that's like one of those freak moments that happens. And obviously we hit the post. Ireland hit the post later on in the game as well, in extra time, isn't it? It was definitely a refreshing performance from Ireland that night against Slovakia, and it's kind of this weird prologue that we've had, that there hasn't been a performance like it since. Like that is the other fact of the matter here, is that performance, when the stakes were at its highest, Ireland played their best performance under Stephen Kenny so far, but they actually just haven't been able to get that back just yet, which would definitely be a slight concern. And the players that are available to Stephen Kenny aren't as good as the players that were available to him that night in Slovakia. In ways, like it's got even more unlucky from his perspective when it comes to injuries and players that have obviously bowed out of international football, for example, and the likes of David McGoldrick. So it started off tough, and they battled through that to put in a good performance. It's now got even tougher, and you would have to question whether or not they'll be able to pull through it again to put in a brilliant performance, because they might need that to get something out of the Serbia game.
Okay, one positive for Ireland obviously been the emergence of Darragh O'Shea as a Premier League defender. Here's Callum Robinson talking about his West Brom teammate.
Yeah, it's crazy actually, because when I joined West Brom on loan last January, Darragh literally just got in properly into the first team. I think he played a cup game against West Ham and done really well, and he kept himself in the team for the league games, pushing for promotion. So I've only seen that. I didn't see Darragh before, but since the day obviously I walked in, and he was always in the team from then on in, and scored some key goals for the promotion push last year. If I can remember, I think Derby, he got a key goal in Millwall away, and then he's progressed again this year. And that was a sort of player that I knew that he would be able to adapt. And you could see even internationally he played in the last few trips and just fitted in. It's just the way he plays. He's a calm player, confident in himself as well, which is good. And I can only see him getting better, and he just needs to keep working hard. As he always does every day, but just keeps working hard and keeps concentrating on one thing, and that's playing football and loving it, and that's what he's been doing this season. And fair play to him, he's had a really good season, and especially for his age.
Do you think he's going to start?
I think so. I think at this point, like I think that if you look at the situation that they've been faced with over the last little while, I guess you want somebody who has trended in the right direction over the last few months, and maybe you could say that when it comes to someone like Darragh O'Shea, because it is his first season in the Premier League. It is his first time playing top tier football, and has got a decent few minutes throughout the entire season. Like, it's very hard to find players who are in a better place, for Irish players that is, who are in a better place now than they were maybe 12 months ago. I think by dint of the fact that he's now a Premier League footballer and the fact that he's playing at a higher level, I think you have to say Darragh O'Shea is, and that can be an important thing. Like, I think when we were talking about the rugby team last week, we were saying how the process of just winning a couple of games, even if it's against a terrible Italy team and maybe not a great Scotland team, despite what people say, it is still the confidence of a win. It is this intangible thing that not a lot of people can really put their finger on. If an Irish player is in a good place, it's probably worth sticking him in the team at this point, because there is this cloud on the outside looking in anyway of just a number of absences, maybe poor form in so many different areas, that if somebody is in a better place now than he was last year, that is almost a reason in itself to put him within a shot of starting. So I think so. Okay, so give me your back four then. Mark Travers in goals, we know that. Mark Travers in goals, Seamus Coleman, Darragh O'Shea, Enda Stevens, Shane Duffy. You're going with Shane Duffy, right? Okay, that's interesting. No Kieran Clark in your team? No. For me, it's actually like it could be a situation between Darragh O'Shea and Kieran Clark almost, with as soon as John Egan got injured. Is Shane Duffy definitely starting? No, absolutely not. So I think it's Clark and O'Shea, and you're keeping Duffy out of the firing line, and you're giving him a game in the friendly, and you're saying, no, we still believe in you, don't worry, you're going to get yourself right in the summer and you'll come back and you'll be the mainstay for the next 3 or 4 years for us, don't worry about it. But just right now, just with the way things are going, we just don't want to add to any of the difficulties you're having. But we're here for you. We love you. No, I get that. I as soon as I saw Egan go down injured, I guess my view on where Shane Duffy could rest in the pecking order maybe changed a little bit. It probably is unwise to throw him straight in there, but there is probably some sort of experience that he can call upon in the depths of Serbia, in the middle of March to actually pull a performance out of a bag. It's based on nothing recent. It's just based on the fact that this is Shane Duffy, and we're missing the banker in the Ireland defence at the moment, which is John Egan. I think that if John Egan was fit, you have to start a form player with him. I just wonder if you need a bigger leader in the middle of that defence, especially when you look at Randolph missing as well. I just wonder. I just wonder if there's going to be a little bit of a surprise here, and there's a reason why I'm not picking the Ireland team. But if I was, I would be edging towards starting Shane Duffy, which doesn't fill me with confidence, I should say. But for that leadership element, maybe the leadership element diminishes with poor form over the course of a season is the other thing.
It's possible. I think the fact that you've got Seamus Coleman there is going to be great for us, and he should definitely start. And I would actually start Matt Doherty in midfield as well. I would certainly be building a team to get out of this with a point and a backs against the wall performance and a stirring 0-0, and I think away we go. That's it. Campaign is up and running. And don't forget, of course, traditionally, as Steve Staunton informed us, the great historian of Irish football, we're usually strong in March, Eoin. I bet you've forgotten that.
Remind me what happens in March.
I don't know. Steve Staunton said we're usually strong in March.
Yeah, he was obviously referring to them beating the Netherlands. Was that game in March? That friendly?
Oh no. No, it wasn't. He just said traditionally we're strong in March. He's obviously one of those great football historians. You could ask him about the split. You could ask him about any of that kind of stuff, and he'd give you a good 20 minutes on it. He'd finish up with don't forget, we're strong in March. So,
we were supposed to be strong in March.
We are.
This was the thing. The Slovakia experience was supposed to be short-term pain, and everybody was supposed to be back, and Ireland were going to be in a much better position come the start of the 2022 World Cup qualifiers. Little did we know that the glory days of that Slovakia playoff were going to be the height of those few months.
11 minutes past 9 this morning here on OTB AM. The glory days of the Slovakia playoff indeed. Here's what we got on OTB Sports Radio for you today. Just tell your Alexa or Google Home to play OTB Sports Radio on TuneIn or not. Sometimes they just pick it up at this stage. OTB Gold is Browne O'Driscoll meeting Eoin Asawa just after the end of Eoin Asawa's career. It's brilliant stuff. State of the Union with Philip Browne. Everything that was spoken about there from last year is largely still relevant. Obviously the deal with CBC hadn't quite gone through at that point. The split season is our documentary season on the inter-county Gaelic football year from 4 o'clock. At 6 it's OTB Gold. Michael Eoin talking about his life after football. Really engaging interview with Michael Eoin. Comes across brilliantly in it. And live tonight obviously sifting through what was a brilliant weekend of sport and a look back at the end of the Cheltenham Festival as well. As I said, 12 minutes past 9 this morning. We've got our Gillette performance rankings next.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB.
Long ball forward for Shaqiri to run onto. First time cross to Salah. He controls it and puts it past Fabianski. And that is a superb Liverpool counter-attacking goal.
OTB live commentary. Never miss the action right here on OTB Sports Radio. Keep up to date with the latest scores on the OTB Sports app. The OTB Sports app. Live score updates straight to your phone.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Auto Mower.
Auto mower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. I have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Auto Mower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
Right, it's 13 minutes past 9 this morning here on OTB AM. Myself and Eoin Sheahan with you every morning from 7:30 all the way through until 10 o'clock. And we'd love to hear from you this morning. Plenty going on in our comments on the YouTube channel as well. youtube.com/off the ball. Best place to get us these days is, of course, on the OTB Sports app. You can download that free, gratis and for nothing. Now, it is time for us to get into our performance rankings this morning. Actually, before we do that, let me tell you about this, because as you know by now, the world's greatest golf podcast, Golf Weekly, has made the move to Patreon. When you sign up, you're guaranteed a podcast every Thursday with extra episodes around the biggest tournaments of the year, interviews with golf's biggest names. You'll also become an official friend of the pod. You'll be able to chat to the lads, Joe, Nathan, Peter and Fionn on our Discord channel. You'll get invites to the golf days whenever we can all get back out there, and there will be exclusive watch parties around the majors. get on to otbsports.com/Golf Weekly and sign up now for just $3.99 a month. That's less than €1 a week. Or just search Golf Weekly on patreon.com. The page is live now and you can join the thousands of other people who have already done so. Oh, and it is time for the performance rankings. Where are we starting? Who's in the red?
In the red this week, we've got Eddie Jones to start things off here. Eddie Jones facing the dreaded review. So whenever you hear that phrase review, it's always bad news. It tends to be anyway. The RFU looking into what happened with the Six Nations here. And I think this is a good place to start because maybe the failings of England are something that we need to take into account before we decide how excited we're going to get about Ireland beating England at the weekend. Like, I think there's people watching this morning who are unhappy with our chirpy tone this morning, and maybe that's down to the fact that they weren't up against much in this current England team at the weekend. So, like, maybe we do need to temper our happiness.
England just beat France. They just beat France, the brilliant French team. They just beat France in under conditions that Wales couldn't do. Where at the end of the game, where they had to produce a winner. Like, this notion that suddenly England are crap because they got beaten by Scotland and they got beaten by Wales. They just beat France. It's the Six Nations. We played quite well. We're allowed to enjoy one game.
Listen, I'm with you. I'm not the person commenting in this morning saying do the opposite of cheering up. Cheer down, lads. This morning, but Eddie Jones, yeah, he's like. Do you now? This is looking at this from a very Irish standpoint. Do you question the future of a head coach who got you to a World Cup final 2 years previously? Like, is there infinite credit in the bank to trust this guy? That this is a guy who had a couple of mediocre Six Nations campaigns in the build-up to the last World Cup and still managed to beat the All Blacks in a World Cup semi-final. Sure, English arrogance got in the way and they got smashed by South Africa in the final, but we would bite Eddie Jones's arm off to get a World Cup final place at this point. Like, maybe it's just an Irish view on this whole thing, and maybe the English expect to not only win the World Cup, but to win every single Six Nations year after year. Maybe we come from very different places on that. But I just wonder if this review does result in added pressure on Eddie Jones, are they putting undue pressure on a man who might actually be their greatest chance of winning the next World Cup?
Well, yeah, maybe. One thing I would say about that is that I watched like 3 minutes of the Gallagher Premiership, and it was the 3 minutes where Bristol scored 2 tries to beat Northampton, basically scored a try and then scored a try from the kickoff. And it was like, what? And you're like, oh, it's Pat Lam. And then Pat Lam is just there having the crack afterwards, like on the verge of his team being the best, most exciting team in club rugby. And you're like, ooh, what if he was in charge of England? That would be very bad for the rest of the world. So there must be somebody in the RFU going, can we have a bit of that? Can we have just a little bit of that? Because he knows the culture. He's been in this part of the world for long enough now that he understands how we play, how the Scottish and Welsh teams would play from his Celtic League experience. It'd be very, very dangerous if Pat Lam was to get the England job. I'd be terrified of that. So I want England to keep with Eddie Jones, and I actually think he's the right man for the job, Eoin.
Like, I see what you're saying about that, but like what Eddie Jones brought to the table over the last couple of years, and like this is not just Eddie Jones, this is the likes of John Mitchell as well, and the rest of his backroom team, was a ferocity that Ireland actually got a little bit shocked by, I felt, over the last few years. And was that just simply missing on Saturday? Like, what was the major contributing factor to such a difference in performance, or the viewing experience in an Ireland versus England game? Because it had become almost routine. I know 4 losses in a row maybe isn't routine, but it was getting there.
No, it was. It was absolutely. It was routine because Saracens had done it to Leinster on 2 separate occasions as well. They'd beaten us up in the scrum. They knew how to stop us being creative, even when it was at club level. I think a load of different things happened. I don't think the Saracens players are match battle hardened and totally fully fit. I think if they were playing all the time in the Premiership, then that would have been one of those things. I think there's a post-World Cup loss hangover that England are suffering, and COVID has equally prevented them from having that relationship with their fans in the aftermath of that, and then also bedding down new players. Like, I don't think England are in crisis at all. I think that this is kind of mid-cycle thing for them, and I certainly wouldn't be rushing to sack their coach, but I do think it'd be catastrophic for us if Pat Lam was to become the England manager. Coach.
Yeah, well, I always see Eddie Jones like the Joker. To be honest, there will be a moment where he will probably come back and be laughing in our faces once again soon. I'm particularly quite wary of writing England off.
Yeah, you've done it before, Owen. You've done it before. One last thing I would say about England is that they are flat track bullies. That they like to be the biggest kid in the schoolyard, and if you can somehow make it not about their terms of engagement, if there are other things that you can do, like moving the ball the way we did and being completely accurate at every possibility and not knocking on and not giving them the opportunity in scrums and not throwing your first, or not paying attention when they throw their line out over the top and smash into you. Also, they didn't have Manu Tuilagi. I think we should, this is, let's beat an England team with Manu Tuilagi in it and then start talking about reaching a World Cup final.
They didn't believe in Vunipola because that was the two they were missing in 2018, wasn't it? They were missing both of them.
Yeah.
And that really took away their power game. So I guess 50% of them being available ain't bad from Ireland's perspective. Next up in the poor performances is Warren Gatland. This was not a good weekend for Warren Gatland, Ger, because Wales lost a game of rugby. I'm not sure if you were watching that on Saturday night, but they had a Grand Slam and then they didn't have a Grand Slam at the end of the day. So Warren Gatland can't just make the Lions Wales light. He can't just install all his former buddies into the Lions team. How much does that late Doolan try affect Warren Gatland and his ability to stack the Lions with Welsh players?
What's the over-under on the number of starting players? That's assuming fitness, right? Right now, if the Lions played South Africa in the first test next Saturday, what's the over-under on the number of Wales players who are in the team?
6.
I'm going 8.
You're going 8?
I'm going 8. I'd say that Warren Gatland's picking 8, and I'm looking at the Guardians team of the tournament. They managed to find 8. Wales obviously won the Grand Slam, did they? Wales must have won the Grand Slam.
The tournament's not over. Either is one other fact.
Where is it here? So Louis Rees-Zammit. Maybe I have miscalculated here. So it's actually only 7. So it's a full back row: Navidi Tipuric-Faletau, Alan Wynne-Jones, Ken Owens, and Louis Rees-Zammit. I miscalculated. I apologise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's only 6. Sorry, it's only 6.
And I would say that actually you can, if you're going to use that as your benchmark, like, it's not going to be an all-Welsh back row for the Lions. Like when England have 2 of the best back rows in the world, in Curry and Vunipola, Ireland might have something to say. Like Wales obviously have an outstanding back row. Clearly, they deserve to have the back row of the tournament. But when it comes to actually picking the Lions team, like, does Gatland actually, like, you'd almost be edging towards the under.
He might pick the full. He might keep those partnerships. Tadhg Beirne would be pretty peeved not to be in that back row.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, like, how does this weekend then factor into the Lions conversation? Like, I would have initially thought that a Pro 14 final would have no bearing on it, but Ireland winning, does that then make Gatland buy a subscription to Premier Sports and make sure he's watching? Does he break quarantine and actually come and watch the game at the weekend? Does this actually become a big factor for the Lions?
Well, maybe he sticks around because he was in the Ireland bubble for the last week anyway.
Oh, yeah.
I think that ultimately the next 3 or 4 weeks are going to be key for the Lions. I think that the Six Nations is important, but because of the way the season has gone, players are finding form, players are getting fit. If you think back to when Alan Quinlan made the Lions selection, he made it off the back of brilliant performances in Europe after the Six Nations was already over. So I'd say that there's plenty of room for some bolters. I think someone like Louis Rees-Zammit, it's irrelevant if he doesn't play another second of rugby. That guy is on the plane, and assuming he's fit, he's starting that first test, and I can't wait to see what that's going to be like. But I think that this game next weekend is suddenly absolutely massive. And it's massive in the context of Munster rugby when you consider that Leinster are going to be without Ringrose, without Will Connors, without Caelan Doris, and without James Ryan. It's now or never, Owen. It's now or never. This is the moment where Munster effectively, I think, have mostly got rude health for everybody, right? I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. There's probably Kilcoyne obviously would be a significant loss.
And Sneeman.
Yes, sorry. But like, you haven't had them all season. So notwithstanding that, like, this is it. There's a trophy on the line. There's the emotion of CJ Stander's last domestic game. ever. They're surely, you must be favourites, I would say, to win this game.
Well, I mean, you can Google that pretty quickly. If you're trying to snare me into talking up Munster, then by all means, paint it as such. But like the other factor here is obviously a certain out half who was rested, who certainly wasn't playing Test rugby, I should say, over the last few weeks, and might be in a better shape to actually affect a game this weekend. Like, it's a huge game for Munster. I would argue though that it has massive. What's this? What have you just discovered?
Leinster -7. No way. No, absolutely not. It's a pick'em. This is a pick'em game. Saturday at 4 o'clock.
You can't argue with the bookies, but 7 points does seem a little bit large. I would probably make Leinster maybe 3-point favourites at this stage.
1.5. 1.5 point favourites for this game.
This is a huge sort of benchmark moment for Leinster as well. If they can come away from the weekend and say, yeah, all our players were playing Test rugby the previous weekend, we were beaten up, we've got injuries, and we still beat Munster, then how does the Leinster supporter feel? They feel pretty superior, I would venture to say, if that's how it turns out this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, Leinster just got beaten at home from a winning position at the weekend too. So I don't know. That game is. All joking aside, I would make Munster slight favourites for that game.
I'm not sure if I'd go that far, but I do think it's unbelievably important. Like it is, in terms of games that are fixed, it is the biggest game of the season, of course. Like as I said last week, I do think Munster, if they had either or when it comes to the trophies, they will always take the European trophy, as would Leinster. But just the specific context of this, getting one over Leinster and having that guarantee of a trophy, because if they win the following week in Europe, there's no guarantee of a trophy. No. I think that is just so important. And what is it? It came up in the quiz last week. 6 Pro 12 titles, was it, that Leinster have won since Munster last won? Is it 6? 5 or 6? I can't even remember my own quiz. It's a significant number, and it's a lot. You need maybe one hand or two to count it. But anyway, it is a hugely significant evening for Munster, and we don't want to frame it all around Joey Carberry, but it's hard not to when he has been one of the players Irish rugby fans have been so excited about over the last few years, and he's not on the pitch last weekend, and then they do the job.
At a point of information, I meant to bring this up a little bit earlier on, but how about this with Sexton plays 10, Carberry plays 12, and Henshaw plays 13. Who wouldn't be excited about that for Ireland? That'd be amazing.
It would be. They should try it out at some point. I do think, is it Keith Earls and Gary Ringrose on the wings then, as Quinlan was suggesting earlier on? Get Ringrose in the team at some place as well. I definitely think that maybe we go back to a place where we see Ireland playing Ringrose and Henshaw midfield again, and that partnership has just so many miles on the clock in a positive sense, that whatever Ringrose is different.
I actually think that Eoin, things have changed. That Ringrose is going to have to come back and play really well to get back in that team now.
Yeah, maybe, I think that he probably does. Like, if it's a clean slate and at the start of next season, himself and Aki and Farrell are all fit. If things are as they stand right now, I still think that Ringrose starts. Let's not forget that Bundy Aki got sent off at the weekend. Chris Farrell probably needs to put himself in the shop window more for Andy Farrell. I love Chris Farrell. I think he's a phenomenal player and he's an absolute game breaker. But he actually, I think, does need to get himself nearer to the front of the queue in an Ireland sense once again. But that's in a roundabout way of saying that the Lions are all to play for. So Warren Gatland, he had to rip up his sheet maybe on Saturday evening. He's down as a poor performer at the weekend. Unlucky, Warren. At number 3 then, we've spoken a lot about this. You can only put them in orange really as Wales. An unbelievable performance from them for a lot of the game, and then to still come away with that utter disappointment, because it would have been one of the great sort of screw you stories that Welsh sport would have ever had. The way they were written off by certain people before the tournament, and to turn around and win a Grand Slam would have been outrageous. And to have that taken away from them at the last moment, genuinely, you do feel a little bit sorry for them.
What?
Genuinely, you gotta feel a tad sorry.
Hang on a second. It's 79-36, and they go off their feet and concede a penalty. What are you doing? Complete madness. It's exactly the same idiotic stuff where they kick the ball back to us with 83 minutes on the clock. What are you doing? It was lunatic stuff. It was kamikaze. And here's the thing, right? Again, just to keep going back, my concern about this was that Wales were awful last year, absolutely awful. And if Pivac had had a bad Six Nations, there's every chance they would have sacked him. But it turns out he's really good. And it was like, he's been ruthless. He's changed up his backroom team. He's got like players playing at an elite level. He's randomly taken a winger who's 100 caps and gone, yeah, you're going to be a centre for us now. And there's a new lease of life for George North. All of a sudden, I think Wales look really dangerous from this point for the next couple of seasons out for a World Cup win. Like Dan Biggar has become somebody who is really ultimately trustworthy and reliable, and I don't know why they took him off. That would be the one thing that you'd be wondering about at the weekend, kind of a pre-fixed selection decision. We're going to make those subs, which, by the way, Andy Farrell didn't do. He didn't just take players off because the cavalry comes in, there's oxygen depletion, you're going to make bad decisions. Like, no, I trust you to be a man and go out there and play on the basis that you're going to raise your game as the match goes on. I thought that was really against the received notion of the statistics and the science, and had a bit of feel to it, which I really liked. Like, it might sound anti-intellectual, but I really liked the fact that he seemed to be playing on the basis of what was in front of him, as opposed to at a fixed moment in the match, I'm going to decide my front row will be replaced, my half-back partnership will be replaced, and the subs will come on.
Yeah, that is true, actually, because it does seem quite formulaic at times when it comes to the substitutions in the front row. And that brings us nicely on to the quality performances from the weekend. We've got Ireland and France in the green here. I think we've spoken a good bit about Ireland and their quality performances. And I guess we kind of touched on it there again with England and the context around this. Like, what is there a sense, I wonder, at this point, that Andy Farrell has secured whatever the prize money is? He has, backed up those two performances against Italy and Scotland with another win, and has given himself a little more job security as a result of what happened at the weekend. And is it at this point now that maybe we start to see a little more risk-taking from management? I think Quinny said it earlier on that he's excited to see a few changes. I think Brian O'Driscoll is making the point maybe that you can't necessarily sack your manager from this point on, or your head coach from this point on, that there was a rocky spell for Andy Farrell at the start of this campaign, and it was crucial that he actually navigated his way through it and got to the 3 wins after losing the opening 2. That I wonder now if we're actually going to start to see a riskier version of management.
I think so. I think that certainly was all the conversation points that I wanted to bring up pre-tournament, that everything was riding on this one, because it is too late. You can't, and we won't change. That's it. His job is now secure all the way through to the World Cup. And it should be, because they made the decision that they were going to give him the job, and they knew that he was an inexperienced head coach. They knew that he would be learning on the job. He has done that. That part of it is over. And yeah, I actually think there was enough from the attacking perspective in that second half in particular, that you're beginning to see the influence of Mike Catt too. That's from here you begin to see growth from a position of confidence. And I think it's the confidence that he has the job, that he has the right backroom team, that he's made those decisions, that they've picked some, like that team selection was not an obvious team selection, I think, to anybody.
No.
It really wasn't to pick Conan. That was like, and it obviously was a triumph. And I don't think it was an obvious even to pick the wingers. I don't think it was guaranteed that Keith Earls was going to get back in the team when he did get back in the team and played really well in the Scotland game too. So, he's been brave under the radar in some ways.
And here's the thing as well, like maybe how this differs to good wins in the past is that the good wins have almost come from a collection of perfect outcomes, and you almost get the feeling that the team picks itself at the end of the perfect outcome happening. Nothing could be further from the truth if you said that about Ireland at the moment. Like even James Ryan now needs to fight to ensure that he's back in the team. Of course he is. He's going to be a future Ireland captain. But like the win happened without him. I mean, Peter O'Mahony for me was a banker to start last week, and it just didn't happen. I mean, he's going to be fighting tooth and nail to get in there. The hooker conversation is a fascinating one. Porter versus Furlong is going to be a battle that goes on for the next little while, even though Furlong looks like he's back to his best. We've talked about the 9s and the 10s all year long, and we've just spoken about the midfield. Andy Farrell does not know his best team, and that is a real positive.
In a way that 3 weeks ago you would have said that, and they were like, I can't believe he doesn't know his best team.
Yeah.
That's the difference between glass half full and glass half empty, Eoin.
Well, yeah, that is very true. So Irish rugby very much in the green. And to finish up, last word this morning goes to French rugby. There was, they've gone through a number of dovetails as well this year. Like, crowning them as 2023 World Cup champions seemed premature when they got beaten by England a week or two ago. And at the same time, they have an ability to put a team to the sword like no other in the Northern Hemisphere, and maybe in World Rugby. When this attack gets going fully, they are an absolute sight to behold. Is there just enough Frenchness in them for them to blow further Grand Slams, future Grand Slams, I should say?
No.
Is there enough Frenchness about them to blow their home World Cup? I think there might be, but God, they're good to watch. Never don't watch France play rugby, basically, is the advice at this point.
Excellent advice. Every Monday morning here on OTB AM, we're giving you the chance to win a Gillette starter pack. All you got to do is get in touch with your suggestions for who needs to be on the performance rankings. France have won it this week. You can enter over the weekend on Twitter or on the OTB IG stories. Eoin says, Charles Olivon, captain, leader, got the try at 77 minutes to begin that sensational comeback versus Wales with a Grand Slam on the line. Rachel Blackmore for dominating Cheltenham. We decided at the last minute to make it rugby exclusive given the events over the course of the weekend, but Rachel Blackmore would obviously have been in the green. Solskjaer should have been red for being reliant on individual brilliance rather than attacking patterns, and Fred in the red for being so bad on the ball and not being able to play when he's pressed. Did Harry Maguire really need to pass on the ball? I don't know. Anyway, look, Jack Colan, on the day we waved goodbye to CJ, he stood up and was counted. Oscar says, good Irish attack, levels above what it's been, and best Irish performance since beating the All Blacks. Eddie Jones, 5, Man United 4, Wales 3, Rachel Blackmore 2, Irish Rugby 1. That's not a million miles away. But congratulations to Tig Fanning, who's won a Gillette starter pack this Monday morning on OTB AM. His persistent selection of Tig Byrne and Tig Furlong, it's the Tig Union in the performance rankings every week, has paid off. So well done to you, Tig Fanning. You're picking up a Gillette starter pack this Monday. That is this week's Gillette performance rankings.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
We'll have more rugby on tomorrow's show. Louise Galvin, Irish star Nadia Power joins us live. There's the latest up close and personal with Mike McCarthy and Devon Toner. And we've plenty of build-up to Ireland's World Cup qualifier with Serbia. Right now, though, bringing you more reaction from the weekend sport. We're going to hear from Irish hockey stars Kate Mullan and Chloe Watkins in a few minutes. But first, here's Andy Dunne with some brilliant analysis on Saturday night in the Aviva.
So, Ireland 32, England 18 here at the Aviva Stadium. And Andy Dunne, I think it's fair to say Ireland signing off the 2021 Six Nations Championship with by far the best performance of not just this year, but the Andy Farrell era so far.
By a distance. Really heartening, just really great to see. It's exciting to see that the team can play in this fashion. It's something that I think the whole country is going to be enthusiastic about now as a result of it is the last game. It's obviously putting one over on the old enemy and doing it in style. And I think it'll be a huge boost to the squad itself and to the management itself, who've been criticised plenty in terms of the overall style of play with which the team have had. So today was a huge, huge moment for that team.
So let's elaborate on it. How did it happen? Why did it happen?
I think how it happened was in a lot of changes in terms of technical detail. If we look at the scrum was very solid. We gave England trouble at the scrum from early on, and England couldn't get any foothold in the game from one of their major strong points being their scrum. They led in early to a couple of early hits. They didn't learn from that themselves, and we were very solid in the scrum. If we look at the line out, we changed how we play off the line out. We treated the back of the line out a lot, and we took the ball down really, really quickly, kind of an off the top play from the tail of the line out, which meant we got the ball into midfield a couple of seconds quicker, which meant the ruck was quicker and Murray could get the ball away quicker, which meant less rucks. There was more tempo in the match. We had less rucks overall. We typically, in the tail end of the Joe Schmidt era and in the early part of the Farrell era, we've averaged way more rucks than opposition teams. In the tail end of the Schmidt era, we were up around 130, 140 rucks per match. Today we'd 79. 79 rucks, 177 of them, I think. But those rucks were faster rucks. We were, given the game's not as labour intensive, it meant we could get the ball with less effort, with less physical grunt work, which meant the forwards were fresher and coming onto the ball at pace. We used the width of the field. We passed better. I think Murray had more opportunity to move the ball quickly because the quality of the ball he was receiving took pressure off Sexton, who was able to add variation in his game and show his experience. And We've got Henshaw probably being our best player, who was instrumental very early on in setting the tone for the Irish team. There were just so many positives. There was that they're all adding up to the hows of the win. I think the why of the win, the why could have been just frustration maybe on everyone's part in the squad, based on the criticism they've received. There's been very little, from myself included and the media in general, I think there's been very little positives to take from recent history. One or two kind of promising moments, but overall we haven't seen a performance that has been a statement performance for this group, and that was by a distance their best performance in the Faroe area.
When was the last time they were at that level in a single game even?
For me, probably the All Blacks win at home. We played very well. We had an effective performance against Scotland in the World Cup, but we didn't play with any style and we didn't play with any creativity in that match. We were just very effective. That was a game where we were stylish, we were creative, we were really, really effective, we were clever. We outthought England on a number of areas. I thought it was really interesting having a look at how we went after George Ford. I think we kind of systematically went after George Ford. We left a bit on him after every tackle. We got inside his head. You could see in the first half he retreated in terms of his depth, and he's been key to a lot of the good qualities in English performances in recent years. And he was choked out of the match, and I think in a perfectly legal way he was suffocated, and I think he was subbed off then 15 minutes into the second half. Farrell was switched into 10, and then Farrell got the head injury, and Jones's ploy to have a 6-2 split on the bench came back to bite him pretty hard at that stage. They were left without either of their starting 10s. So, yeah, I think probably our best performance since the All Blacks win at home here.
And setting the standard early. As I know we were saying when we were watching those early stages, 15 minutes in, we'd counted 2 choke tackles, one for scrums by Robbie Henshaw, a line break by Robbie Henshaw, and a tackle on Elliot Daly right under the English post from a high ball. Robbie Henshaw getting up right up on top of him, Ireland winning a penalty. All that from one player inside 15 minutes. Like that, talk about setting the stall out. And on Robbie Henshaw in particular, he was man of the match today. Up there with Tadhg Beirne probably as player of the tournament from an Irish point of view.
Yeah, I think overall I would say he has been our player of the tournament. I think he's consistent in his defensive duties. Today he kind of stepped up above that consistency, and that first 15-20 minutes, if you need people to lead by action and set the tone, one of the areas I think we've not struggled hugely in terms of our attitude at any stage. There's been no criticism of our application, our attitude. And you'd often see that characterised in a team by the speed with which they come off the line defensively. And we've been doing that really well against most oppositions in recent weeks. Today was another mark-up again on that. The first 15-20 minutes, it looked from on high here, it looked like England were really struggling to maintain any kind of composure on the ball based on the how aggressive we were in that defensive line, and they looked very rattled by that. And I think Henshaw set the tone. As a 13 often will, he'll be the person who'll decide when to shoot out of the line and lead that line. And it was an interesting shift positionally for him. He's been so effective at 12. Obviously Ringrose had a poor day last day and then wasn't available for selection, so Henshaw switches one position out, but he showed he's equally effective, if not more effective, in at 13 today. And
on Henshaw in particular and his all-round game, like, he's definitely brought it on to a new level in the last couple of months. So what I'm trying to figure out is, what is he doing now, or what isn't he doing at the moment in comparison to maybe 12 months ago?
I think players, I don't think there's ever been any question marks about Robbie Henshaw's abilities. His lowest point in an Irish jersey was probably an Ireland-England game here at fullback, and I also think he's, he got harshly criticised in that game. He didn't have a great match, but he's also much like Elliot Daly. He's very capable at fullback. He's very capable at centre. He's not going to play. I don't think he's going to play a whole lot at fullback for Ireland. But I would back him that he'd be quite comfortable to play back there. But my point in terms of what he's doing at centre that's different in the last 12 months, I think he's just had I think he's just match sharp. He's had a run of games where he's kind of at peak energy levels. His injury profile has been very low. He's got a lot of momentum in his game and confidence in his game. And I think he, if we can see him add in, he's got distribution in his game. He's probably not had the opportunity to distribute a lot the way we've played. If we could see him add that into his game, that's probably more a tactical decision by management. He's got that in the locker as well. So it would be great to see that final little flourish come into his game. But in terms of physical contribution around the field and at key moments, he's been outstanding.
Other players that impressed today, like there were definitely quite a few, but if you were to pick out one or two more?
Overall, I thought the forward pack were outstanding. And I thought in defence, if we looked at Tadhg, Ian Henderson in particular, and Van der Flyer and Stander. So 4 of those in terms of the 8 were outstanding defensively and caused huge disruption to the English attack. And in terms of our attack and our offensive play, I think Jack Conan stood out. The difference of having a kind of a thoroughbred athlete ball player at number 8 as opposed to a heroic workhorse that is CJ Stander, and he's added huge value to the Irish jersey through his work ethic. But I think there's a discernible difference in terms of what we can do in terms of our creative play when we've got a ball player at number 8, and Jack most likely is going to get huge credit for that line-out play. I think that's a management deserve a lot of credit for that. Jack will get credit for his execution, but his general play around the field, I think he's a brilliant reader of the game, and he will add a lot to the Irish back row if he can stay injury-free. We've also got the likes of Kaylan Doris there. Hopefully he can come back into the fray, and we've never really had huge problems in terms of depth in the back row. But overall, those standout performers in the Irish pack, probably the 4 lads I mentioned defensively were just superb, and then Conan, I think, stood out just in terms of that attacking prowess.
And then as a whole as well, the line out and the scrum in particular were excellent as well. So it's not just individual performance, there was all coming together as a whole as well.
Yeah, but interestingly, we much like the rucks, I think we, like I said, 79 rucks in total, which is vastly smaller amount of rucks than a lot of our previous internationals in recent years. But also I think we only had 5 scrums and maybe 12 lineouts, and won all of our scrums and 11 out of 12 lineouts. But it's actually the way we used the quality of that ball. It wasn't 18 scrums and 22 lineouts that we won, but it gave us stale midfield ball. It actually created high tempo ball in midfield, which split up the English defence, took away all of their momentum, and allowed our players to come onto the ball at pace. So sometimes stats can be misleading. I think in today's stats, they're hugely instructive and insightful, that we've reduced our scrums but remained very much delivering a quality scrum. We've reduced our amount of lineouts, but we've improved the quality of ball we're delivering to the midfield, and we've reduced our ruck count as a result, which means we're less labour intensive, we've more energy in the game, and it showed. I mean, we'd massive amount of energy even going into the last 7-8 minutes, down to 14 men and then 13 men. We showed huge appetite still at that stage and huge energy levels, and I think it's because we conserved our energies to the game.
All right, welcome back, and I'm delighted to be joined on the show now here on OTB Sunday by Chloe Watkins and Katie Mullan, both members, of course, of the Irish women's hockey team. Both very welcome, guys, to the show. Thanks a lot for taking the call.
Thanks for having us.
You're fresh out of heat training, which is pretty intense by the sound of things. Can you explain to people who are not elite athletes like me what something like heat training involves at the moment?
Yeah, well, we've been lucky enough to use the facilities up here in Sinai, but it's essentially you're on the bike for 45 minutes, doing sort of intervals and that kind of thing. So upping the speed and upping the resistance for a period of time, and then in obviously, I don't know what it. Yeah, and then they come in and take your temperature every few minutes, and then you just try and survive.
Try and get through it. I guess we're speaking to you now off the back of this Softco series at Queen's University. So last weekend, and anyone who was following it will have seen how well you guys did. The three games against the reigning Olympic champions in Great Britain, a win, a loss, and a draw. Katie, you must be pretty satisfied overall with how last weekend went.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was brilliant that we got such a high quality opposition to come to the north to play against us. And I suppose the biggest thing for us, though, irrespective of the results, is our performance. And we're so proud of our performance in all 3 games. It gives us huge confidence in the training we've been doing the last few months. And I suppose that's given us a boost now to go back onto the training pitch come next week as well. So yeah, it's just a shame we couldn't have some fans in the stands to kind of enjoy the event with us. But it was brilliant to get the coverage, and I'm sure plenty of people watched it at home.
Chloe, is it all the sweeter beating Team GB? I mean, you hadn't beaten them at international level before last Sunday, if I'm not mistaken, and you managed to score a goal in the game you won. So does it add a little bit of extra spice when it's that kind of rivalry?
Yeah, I think, there's never any extra motivation needed when you're playing your neighbours. So we were all very much excited for this series. And then you add in the fact that we hadn't played international matches in so long. Everyone was really hungry for the win. So it was definitely a factor. But, it was, I suppose, when it's something you haven't done before, as a squad, we're always striving to achieve new things, and it was definitely something we had set our sights on. So we're really delighted with how it went.
And is it the same as Katie said, the performance was so crucial as well, and even that game 3 that you drew dominated the game for large periods, it has to be said. It must be satisfying to get those performances clicking, and not only the results as well.
It is, we've been training for such a long period now. Sometimes it can be hard to know where you're at. And you kind of need to take a temperature check. So we were a bit uncertain coming in how we'd fare, but I don't think we've ever sort of controlled the matches in the fashion that we did before. So that was really promising. And there's definitely some things that we need to focus on and work on over the next few months, but we're not looking to peak now anyway, so it's good to have things in mind to target.
Katie, as Chloe says there, to have things in mind to improve on and work on, and constructive criticism is something that improves teams along the way. And even listening to some pundits who know about hockey a lot more than I do, but talking about maybe the conversion rate from penalty corners, things like conceding late on in game 3, those are all minor things, but things that I guess over the next coming months give you and the team a focus on things to improve on as the Olympics draw closer.
Yeah, definitely. And in tournament hockey, those are the high pressure moments that really matter. So in some senses, it's good that those things happen now, that we can work through them on the training pitch to make sure that come tournament time in the summer, they don't happen again. So yeah, definitely huge things to learn from. And our PCA count was positive in the sense that we won a lot of corners in the 3rd game, but we would like to get a better conversion rate there. So that gives us a really, really key takeaway to go away and work on now in the training pitch. And we understand that these games are, huge for us in terms of our development going forward now, and we hope to get more competition in the coming months.
I want to ask you both about lockdown and how that has been for elite athletes, because you had that wonderful moment in Donnybrook, what seems like such a long time ago now, when you qualified and became the first Irish women's team to qualify for an Olympic Games in hockey. And then you had the anticlimax of the Olympics being postponed for the year. And I think was it maybe last September when you all got back together and started training again. But Chloe, if I might start with you, I know you I think the last time we spoke to you, you were talking about doing your accountancy work. And I read somewhere you talking about how the boredom of lockdown at one point had you doing jigsaws, 1,000-piece jigsaws, which is extraordinary. So you must be glad to at least have got that part of lockdown over with, and now you can focus back on training and working together.
Yeah, I think the novelty of the jigsaws definitely wore off after 6 or 7. Yeah. But yeah, I suppose I was lucky enough to be able to go back to work with Mazars. So I had that to kind of keep my day-to-day routine and to try and take off a few exams and that kind of thing. So that definitely kept me busy. But I suppose now we're in the state that, you know, the sort of business end of the season, and we're coming close to the summer, and things are ramping up intensity-wise. So I'm just kind of excited to get back into training full-time from that point of view. But it was great to have, and I was certainly fortunate because, you know, some people didn't have that. And I also got a puppy, which definitely helped lockdown as well in my house.
What did you call the puppy? You didn't go with a lockdown type name? Something simple, probably.
No, she honestly, we couldn't name her for like 2 or 3 weeks. It was really tough. We were all fighting about it, but we landed on Sadie. So she's great. Can't recommend it enough. She features on our calls as well, so that's great.
See, my sister got a puppy right at the start of lockdown as well last March, and has been one of the absolute highlights. It almost distracts you from it, gives you a little bit of a focus. Someone, just a little creature that knows no better.
Yeah, exactly. Just endless happiness and positivity. That's just happy about everything. So it kind of lifts your mood for sure.
Katie, how have you found it? I know you've been working as a visualization engineer and within the medical profession as well, providing 3D printing. So how have you found that? How has your work been impacted over the last year or so?
Yeah, I suppose huge because first of all, we were working on providing PPE in that mad rush that was going on about a year ago now. So we were just trying to help in any way we could with our connections that we have in hospitals, and they were coming to us with all sorts of ideas of how we could help them and what we could maybe provide them with the 3D printers. So that was kind of the first part. But more recently, there's been a huge backlog in surgeries because a lot of surgeries didn't happen, critical surgeries that should have happened. And so they're playing catch up constantly. And I suppose our biggest thing in work is that we help to reduce the surgeon's time in theatre. So I suppose with the backlog and being able to reduce that time, we've been very busy. And similar to what Chloe said, I've been so grateful for my work at Axteel during the time because we were all a bit lost. I know I had stepped away from work just before COVID hit. So I was a bit lost then at the start, and work rang me and said, listen, the work's there if you're ready to come back and work from home for us. So I was absolutely delighted. And yeah, it's been brilliant. I suppose from September, we've been pretty busy back to training as well. So we've been very lucky in that our social interaction has been a lot more than it is for most. And we're so grateful, albeit that it's outside and at a distance, we still get to see each other. So that's a lot more than most are getting.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face